come in after about 30 seconds. It's like stupid.
Yes.
Hi, yeah, you right? Yeah, I'm fine, thanks. Yes.
There is one hill that's delayed.
Tonight? Yeah.
Minute 30 delay. Yeah, we're all good.
Well, yeah, the time we'll get out of here. What we,
Did you just get someone say the meeting's being recorded? So my screen is not going to be a feature of the broadcast.
So he's going to double check. If there's absolutely no one zooming in, then there's almost no point of taking the feed from your laptop. No. So we'll take it from the cameras so that whatever we display, which is essentially what will be on the YouTube.
That's better because it means I can keep things open, and if I need to,
exactly, yeah,
I can re-access the meeting, etc., etc.
Yeah, that's what we'll do.
I think that's the best. We'll just double check.
Just take random.
No one's zooming tonight. Sure. What I do, I leave it as it is. Leave everything as it is. So when I plug the HDMI, and plug it on the output of the ATEM. The other output, which could be a direct output. Now the screen should show.
Great.
Shall we go?
Lovely.
Agreed? So my screen won't feature.
Correct.
All I'm doing is hosting the meeting.
Correct.
And you're just signing off your own footage. Which means that I can keep my email, etc. open. So if any last things pop up, they won't display on the
Wait, do you want to
should
we just and if it's completely damning, we can put it up there if you want it.
Yes,
yeah.
good. Lovely.
All the audio's coming out of the microphone. So this mic picking up ambient noise. Okay, right. Until it starts. So you should be able to listen to it.
Yeah, it's on. It's on and running, and we can hear you.
yeah, just was pointed out.
Bell works.
Go live.
Oh my God.
Yes.
Hiya. Box. Does that mean it's working? Oh, hang on.
Paul's just there.
Please be seated. Thank you. Right. Well, good evening, everybody. Back in Charter Hall again, and obviously we're all wearing masks when we're moving around. And I will just announce the safety requirements. So I'm Councillor Robert Davidson. I'm Mayor of the Colchester Borough, and I'll be chairing the meeting today. This meeting is being broadcast live over the internet on the Council's YouTube channel and will also be available on that to watch afterwards. I want to confirm that all of us present in the room are adhering to the latest government guidance for COVID. I can assure those watching that the meeting room is set up to meet socially distanced requirements, and whilst we are not wearing masks while seated, these will be worn if and when we leave our seats. We have undertaken a COVID risk assessment for this meeting. 2 matters of housekeeping. Should the alarm sound, please evacuate using the nearest emergency exit and assemble at the skate park outside. Leisure World staff will be on hand to direct you. And if necessary, we will look to have breaks at approximately 90-minute intervals. I'd like to invite my chaplain, Dr. Reverend Amanda Elms, to say prayers for us.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening. Let us pray. We give thanks for our Mayor, Councillor Robert Davidson, and for all the members of this council. Please bless them in all that they do and in and for this borough. As we meet together for this full council meeting, we thank you for giving everyone here gifts and skills which may be used in the service of this great borough. And as the Deputy Mayor for 2022-23 is elected, please guide everything associated with their election this evening. Please guide us through your Holy Spirit so that wise and informed decisions are made for the benefit of our community this evening. Help us to discuss the issues with courtesy, truth, and mutual respect, and grant that all who are representative of this community and its people will seek to serve the common good through him who came not to be served, but to serve, Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. And let's join together in the prayer Jesus taught us. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Thank you very much, Dr. Reverend Elms. I believe you'll be leaving us, but may I wish you a very joyous and healthy Christmas. We have apologies currently from Councillor Coleman, Councillor Lilly, Councillor Luxford-Vaughan, and Councillor Gocher may appear later. Not as the ghost of Christmas past, but through the back doors there. The declarations of interest. Have any councillors got to declare any interest on any item on the agenda, please? Any hands up? No? Okay, thank you very much. We have one member of the public having... Oh, we now have two. Okay. Okay, thank you. So we have two speakers, and the first one is Steve Kelly. You have 3 minutes. There will be a bell after 2. If you'd like to come to the desk at the front of the room, please. Is he here? Okay, in that case, the second speaker is Mr. William Sunnox, and he wishes to talk on the item 8.4, climate change, motion L. But if you'd like to come forward, Mr. Sunnox, to the desk, thank you. And again, you have 3 minutes, and there's a bell after 2.
Okay. Yes, thank you very much, Mayor, for letting me speak. Some of you may remember me from the days of the debates about the garden communities, a project which was eventually thrown out by the planning inspector, or most of it was thrown out by a planning inspector after 5 years, and the expenditure of 7 million of public money. I want to talk today about the climate change motion, which contains all sorts of policy suggestions for our national government. I hope this will be rejected, not because I don't support urgent action, but because I do. Council needs to concentrate on what it can control and stop talking about what it can't. I happen to agree that we shouldn't be cutting overseas aid, but this isn't the right place to say it. Instead, we should stick to the knitting. The Council has real responsibilities which need real action, and I'll give some examples. We need to understand why 1,000 homes in the Council's estate haven't even got an EPC certificate, let alone the best insulation or heat pump technology. We should, of course, support the request for a plan to insulate local homes, as in motion I. We should be asking what can be done about the perverse incentives that make it much cheaper to drive than to use public transport. And we should be asking which buildings we can renovate rather than rebuild using carbon-intensive bricks and concrete. And I've just had a very interesting conversation with a gentleman from the Green Party who was pointing out that there's a VAT incentive to pull buildings down rather than renovating the existing ones. Hugely wasteful. We also need to avoid making impractical promises. How do we build 920 houses each year without any more roads? I live near Great Tay, and I often don't know whether the trip to Markstay Station will take 4 minutes or 40 minutes. What a waste of people's lives to have such long queues every day. Anyone voting for this motion needs to spare a thought for the drivers for whom it will only get worse, and the residents who suffer the consequent pollution. So let's stop grandstanding and instead focus on things that we can actually influence. Boring, may be, but much more credible in the long term. I urge you to reject or heavily amend this motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sunnox. Right. We'll now carry on with the agenda. So we now have to invite Councillor Crowe. No? Oh, I beg your pardon. That's if Mr. Kelly spoke. And presumably if he does turn up later, we will allow him the option to speak. So now I'm going to move motion A, which is that I move the minutes of the meetings held on the 15th of September and the 20th of October 2021 be confirmed as a correct record. Does anybody have any problems with those? Excellent. Good democratic officers then. Excellent. So those have agreed, thank you. Now the Mayor's announcements. Obviously we're all rather frustrated by this new variant for COVID, but I think all we can do is protect ourselves and protect those more vulnerable people in our society, and follow the guidelines wherever possible. It's a difficult situation, but I'm sure we're all looking forward to Christmas. I went to Sir David Amos's funeral representing Colchester. There was a wonderful turnout. The one in Southend, I hasten to add, not the one in Westminster. And his family's message was that please show respect and kindness to each other. Not just elected representatives, but actually to our constituents as well. So I'd like to think that with Christmas spirit in the air, that will be forthcoming today. I'd also like to note the passing of former councillor Ray Cole, who was a West Burgolt councillor from 84 to 90 and 95 to 99. His passion, if you like, was the arts committee, but I personally didn't actually know him, but we thank him for his near 10 years of service to the council. I have a Christmas Carol reading by Anthony Roberts in the Old Library on the 16th of December as a fundraiser for our mayoral charities, and that you'd be very welcome to come. It's £10 or £5 for children, and there's a very accomplished pianist, Jamie Cunliffe, I think, accompanying him. And there will be refreshments, alcoholic and non-alcoholic, and mince pies to follow. So if you feel like a couple of hours of entertainment, we'd be delighted to see you from 7 o'clock in the Old Library as part of the Town Hall on the 16th of December. And then on the 19th of December, I've got my mayoral carol service, and we're meeting at the Moot Hall, at the Town Hall to robe up, and then we'll be processing to Lion Walk in Lion Walk Square, where we'll be taking part in their normal carol service, where of course Ian Ray is their choir and organist. So that should be quite a joyful occasion. I would hasten that anybody that hasn't responded, I think we've got 45 people so far, but there are room for a few more. So if you haven't responded yet, please email mayor@colchester.gov.uk, and we'd look forward to you joining us. Right, thank you. We now move on to item 6, which are items referred to under the call-in procedure. There are none. So item 7, recommendations of the Cabinet panels and committees. Item 1, establishment of a joint committee for tendering Colchester Borders Garden Community. I think we have, before we ask Councillor Dundas to move the motion, we have a written statement from Councillor Luxford Vaughan, which I think Mr. Clifford is going to read.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is as you say, a written statement from Councillor Luxford Vaughan. Supporters of the garden community concept insisted the way to deliver them was via a development corporation. Observation that it was unlikely the Secretary of State would grant these powers to us was ignored. Confirmation from planning experts that CPOs could not be used were dismissed because of the advice of the unqualified MD of the now defunct NEGC. Now we have a different but still untested proposal. However, the government still advises the essential element of success of garden communities is control of the land value uplift. We have no control. The build quality of traditional development is less than we would want. A garden community demands even higher standards still. A traditional development model and the existing planning system will not deliver anything close to a garden community. The proposal is to water this down further by two other authorities with different priorities. It's inevitable it will not deliver on the promises we have made. How will a joint planning committee balance the burden on our infrastructure versus tendering's desire to generate a rate income in perpetuity and give all affordable homes to their residents? How can ECC councillors not be predetermined by the legally binding HIF agreement that has so many demands, including housing delivery targets? ECC has already proven this predetermination by granting themselves planning permission for an environmentally destructive road. ECC councillors deliberately ignored multiple material planning grounds to object to the road. Therefore, despite it not complying with significant national and local planning policy and everyone's climate emergency declarations, it was granted permission. A commitment to the HIF grant agreement creates a conflict of interest and predetermines all ECC councillors on any committee. Our councillors appear to have focused on a sideshow and are scrapping over the crumbs this joint committee might offer. Greenstead ward councillors are claiming they should have a seat at the table because the development will have the greatest effect on their community. To be clear, this development is planned within the ward boundaries of Elmstead, Ardley and Wivenhoe. All master plan options show development less than 100 yards from homes in Wivenhoe. The most important reason not to vote for this arrangement is that councillors at tendering are adamant that only 1,250 homes will be allocated Colchester throughout the lifetime of the project. We have no agreement in place to contradict this. We should not be investing in a DPD for 9,000 homes until this can be rectified, and should not further dilute our position by agreeing to this joint venture until this is the case. Trust and good do not secure agreements. They need to be legally binding and able to withstand political change. A joint planning committee with authorities motivated by anything but the principles of a garden community will not produce one. If Colchester still wants to put our name to this aspiration, then they will need to find an alternative way of controlling it. And that's the end of the statement, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Clifford. And we have two further speakers that would like to have their 3 minutes of public say. So can I invite Manda O'Connell up to the front desk, and there'll be a bell at 2 minutes, and you're allowed 3. The second speaker is James Marchant, just to prepare.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am a resident of Greenstead and current chair of the TCB Garden Community Liaison Group. And in both capacities, particularly keen and concerned that interests of East Colchester will be represented by full CBC participation in the proposed Joint Planning Committee. This is partly in order that it may continue progressing along the encouraging lines of community engagement on all sides of the garden community search area that we have seen so far. I would also like to emphasise that regardless of where the council boundary lines fall, this is very much a shared development that will benefit both districts with housing stock. And also emphasise that housing and development layout it will represent that we can influence, provided, of course, that we as Colchester Borough Council are involved in that planning committee. We have an opportunity here to produce and indeed showcase an innovative, sustainable development in harmony with the local landscape, to meet our housing needs for the next 30 years. I want to be proud of Colchester Borough Council and to see it taking part of the credit for this, not obstructing or undermining these joint initiatives to support it and progress it. And as the mother of a daughter with a very well-paid job who cannot afford to buy in Colchester, I can assure all present that this housing stock, with its 30% of affordable housing, is very much needed. I'm sure other parents here would agree. I would urge all members, therefore, to put party politics aside in favour of our common humanity and housing needs, and for the sake of our Colchester residents today and tomorrow, and vote in favour of the Joint Planning Committee, working together to address the very real needs of our community and its residents, and indeed in recognition of the garden community green plans of the planet. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Amanda O'Connell. And the next speaker is James Marchant, please.
Hello, sorry. My name's James Marchant. I represent Colchester East Action Group, which has been campaigning regarding the garden community since 2013. I'm also a resident of Longridge Park. I think the tendering Colchester Borders garden community should go ahead with a large green buffer between it and the existing communities in East Colchester. This will prevent speculative development happening in the area, an awful example of which we've already seen with the 140 houses built just off Bromley Road near to Salary Brook. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Marchant. Right, we will now ask Councillor Dundas, the Leader of the Council, to move motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that the recommendations contained in draft minute 605 of the Cabinet meeting of the 17th of November 2021 be approved and adopted. I think this item is probably the most important one tonight, actually, because it has ramifications for many years, possibly decades, and it is a very rare occasion that any council cedes or acquires powers from another local authority. But before addressing the matter in hand, I also want to talk about TCBGC and what tonight's decision is not about. My opinions on TCBGC are well known. They are a matter of public record, so there is no point in me denying that I have long said I didn't think it would be a success, and this council under previous stewardship was making the wrong decision in pursuing it. I spent 10 days at the last hearings pointing out with colleagues of many political persuasions why and where I thought it simply wouldn't work or be deliverable in anything like the format envisaged by its promoters. Equally, I've always been aware that the sharing of housing numbers was only valid for the first 2,500 houses. If anyone thought differently, please take that up with whoever told you different, but it has always been there in black and white. What I can tell you is that having spoken at length about this with officers, we are confident that whatever happens, the sharing of the 2,500 is guaranteed. Subsequent numbers are not guaranteed and would require agreement from tendering in the next plan period beyond 2033. However, none of this is directly relevant to tonight. Tonight is simply a yes-no decision on whether to participate in the joint committee. It is not about who is on it. People will change with time. It is not about the format or numbers. It is endgame on this, and a decision is required. That decision is simply a yes or a no. But let's look at what powers we are losing from our committees into the joint one. We are transferring powers from our planning committee to the joint one, as is tendering and ECC. But really, what are those powers? Please look at the map. It is highly likely there will be no residential planning applications in Colchester whatsoever before the mid-2030s. It is actually quite likely there will in fact never be any residential development in Colchester at all for TCBGC. The most we will ever see come before our planning committee are plans for footpaths, tree planting, and maybe some offices. Without the committee, all of it will come before Tendering's planning committee, on which I have to point out we have 0 seats. Responsibility for the joint DPD will transfer from our local plan committee to the joint committee. But as things stand, it is still a joint DPD. Our local plan committee will not have carte blanche to do what it wants. It has to develop it with tendering. And whether developed by multi-committees or a joint one, our full council, this full council, still has to vote on it and still has the right of veto. That does not go with this committee. So really, what real-world powers are we losing? I've heard people say that with only 3 members we will be outvoted. And yes, we might be. We probably on occasion will be. But I guarantee with 0 members we'll certainly be outvoted. On numbers, 5 might have worked better for us. But this is a 3-way negotiation. Tendering have their opinions, and Tendering and Essex have both said a firm no. We've negotiated hard. Tendering have agreed to a rotating chair. ECC have agreed to devolve all their planning powers, which is far more than originally offered, into the joint committee. ECC have also offered 2 local observer places. By local, I mean local members. As Mick Jagger once said, you don't always get what you want, but sometimes you do get what you need. Like all decisions, there are columns with ticks for and ticks against. Having added them all up, I think there are more ticks in the for than the against columns. So I recommend we vote for it. But councillors, I will listen to the debate, and it is your decision, and I will happily accept whatever your decision is.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dundas. We have a list of speakers, 6 so far, starting with Councillor Bentley.
Mr. Mayor, mine's brief, not a speech, and I should have perhaps done this at the beginning, but giving it some thought, my fault, my apologies. I wish to declare an interest because I am the leader of Essex County Council and one of the 3rd partners on this joint committee. I won't sit on the committee, but of course I am who I am, and I just want to make that declaration so we know. I know we're advised not to always report and declare on other authorities. I think just for the sake of openness, I should. Thank you.
That's noted. Thank you. Councillor Jowers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And very similar in that a somewhat emotive diatribe from Councillor Luxford-Vaughan. I was chairing the meeting where the link road was passed by all parties, apart from the Green Party, I believe. That had nothing whatsoever to do with this decision to have the joint committee, nothing at all. But I will take Mr. Weaver's advice on whether that debars me from having anything further to say.
Mr. Mayor, no, it doesn't. Thank you.
Your interest is noted, Councillor Jowers. Right, in that case, if Councillor Bentley doesn't wish to speak further, no. The next one is Councillor Willits, please.
Mr. Mayor, I support collaborative working in any way possible because I think that brings about the best understanding and probably the best results. So in principle, I would certainly support the setting up of a joint committee, but noting, of course, the strong caveats that have just been given by the leader of the council. However, I have a rather jaundiced view of new town projects stemming back to what happened in the proposals for the West Tay development several years ago. And thinking of that particular project, in the past there were serious questions surrounding secrecy of decisions and key documents concerned with the proposals and the development, which I felt was very counterproductive when viewed from the backbench positions which we hold. For instance, I recall that PwC was commissioned to deliver a document. We paid them £50,000 of taxpayers' money, and it was so critical of the approach that it was only offered in a redacted form to elected members of this council, and even then we weren't allowed to take pictures, make notes, or take copies of it. And that's not the way our involvement should be, even if the main focus is on the members of the joint committee. I recall, Mr. Mayor, spending hours wading through the statutory list of expenditure on items of over £500, trying to find out who had been given the contracts, what for, whether or not they had been delivered on the West Tay project. There was total silence on whether the committee had actually signed any of the purchase options, a really critical area of moving forward on this type of development, despite the council taking funds to complete these negotiations. And again, hours spent trying to extract meaningful financial data from the management committee, which seemed determined that backbench members should not see or understand the risks and the implications of the project. Philosophically, Mr. Mayor, I support the setting up of this committee. It's sensible to do, but what I look to the leader of the council to give is assurance that these horrors of the past will not be repeated in the new project.
Thank you, Councillor Willits. Councillor Gerard Oxford, please, next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before I start, I just need to seek some guidance from Mr. Weavers whether or not I need to declare an interest as the current chair of the local plan.
Mr. Mayor, the answer is no, you don't.
Okay, thank you very much. In that case, I'm only going to say briefly, I've always felt you're better off if you've got a seat at a table rather than not. Otherwise, you have no say at all rather than a limited say. So from my perspective, this is a 30-year programme. People like me, and maybe some even older than me, dare I say, probably won't see it through. But nonetheless, it's a long period of time, and people who will be on it will change, and probably quite regularly. But in my view, it is a case of, I think it's better to be there at the table and represented than not. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Oxford. Councillor Julie Young, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'm really pleased to see Andrew O'Connell and James Marchant with us this evening, because we had some real good common sense coming from Greenstead residents, which is very welcome. So thank you for them for attending and sharing their views with us. And I think Greenstead residents have been really pragmatic, and I think us as ward councillors in Greenstead have really played a very straight bat in terms of the garden communities. And we have been on this journey for a long time, Mr. Mayor. The Labour group's position on setting up this joint committee is one of support. It is an on-balance decision, but as others have argued, it's better to have some influence rather than no influence. But I would stress to you, Mr. Mayor, that as building works continue, just over the brook, 145 houses, as James Marchant has talked of, it is acutely in the mind's eye of Greenstead residents of what more development looks like. And whilst it sits within the wards of Elmstead and Wivenhoe, the impact, as I would argue, will be most keenly felt by the residents of Greenstead, and that's why I make no apology for arguing for a seat at the table. I hear what the Leader of the Council says. Tonight is about determining who sits on that joint committee, but I, as again, make no apology for arguing that Greenstead should have a seat at that table to represent the interests of one of our most deprived wards.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Councillor Jowers, please.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And in fact, all I wanted was to declare that interest that I'd have already said, Mr. Mayor. I'm not going to add anything to it.
It's just that Mr. Weaver's allowed you to speak again if you wished, but that's fine. Thank you. We'll go on further down the list. Councillor Corey, please, next.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm pleased to hear some of what's been said already this evening, and I believe that at the briefing that we had, there was clear voices from Colchester councillors to make sure that we have as full a representation as possible and a mix of representation. And I appreciate the leader taking that to the neighbouring councils who are part of this project and trying to get better representation. I still think we need to go further, and I do hope that the review of about a year going forward will take on board to make sure we've got as much representation as possible that takes in local members, that takes in a broad spectrum of councillors from this council. It's good to hear that we now have the position of local observers, and I will just be transparent as the local divisional member at the moment on the county council. That is likely to be me, but I don't think that prohibits me from speaking now. This is of vital importance, and I do hope to be there in 30 years' time looking at how this project has been going. But I do have a concern about the feedback from the meeting that recently happened with tendering, where the numbers, the future numbers beyond this planned period are not set in stone to be shared. I believe that should be part of these discussions and negotiations. I've made it clear to the current leader of the council that I am supportive of meeting and helping with that as my previous role as leader of the council. The discussions that we have had between neighbouring authorities have always been collaborative, and for me that means going beyond this planned period for the whole project, which goes on for potentially 60 odd to 70 years. So I feel that this must be part of the negotiations going forward to ensure a good relationship with our neighbours so that we get better representation on these committees going forward, but we get agreement on the sharing of numbers for this whole project, not just for the planned period. So I appreciate the work that's been done so far. We've got more to go, but I'm supportive of a collaborative approach. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Corey. Councillor Fox next, please.
Thank you very much, Mayor. And I'd also like to thank the residents of Greenstead for coming along. And it is really good to see residents engaged and knowledgeable about this issue. And as Councillor Young said, to consider to be pragmatic about this particular process. There obviously has been division in the council over recent years about this particular project, but this council has passed section 1 of the local plan that does include the garden community, and therefore I think it's right that we continue to play a part in how the garden community develops. Others have talked about what we might have had had we had the opportunity to have a local-led development corporation. Of course, that didn't happen because it was to be provided on the basis that all 3 garden communities in Essex were part of the local planning process. That didn't happen, despite the fact that it was supported by councils of all political persuasions across the county, by central government. And I think it's part of the broken planning system whereby short-termism is placed ahead of the sort of long-term planning that we try to do in this authority. And I think we took a brave step in order to try and plan for the long term. And I think working together with tendering and with Essex County Council on this project in the future is the right way to go about ensuring that Colchester has a voice and can continue to put our point of view on the garden community in the future. It is for us to agree that DPD as well, and that is what will ultimately play its role in how the community develops. I'd also just like to say that I think it's right that there is local representation from those communities that will be most affected on the Garden Community Committee as well. But as others have said, I think on balance, it's right that we play a role, and it's right that that we agree this tonight. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Fox. Our next speaker is Councillor King, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My thanks to our guest speakers. It's a rare pleasure, let's be frank, to have people come along and speak up for something as opposed to speak against it. Both are valuable to us, but it is refreshing. And it's refreshing to also to hear that their early experience of the engagement process, which many of us can only glimpse from a distance, has also been so encouraging for them, and I hope for their wider communities that they're representing. It's not just us, is it? It's about those who are not here and in the many ways in which they can engage. So I take some comfort from that as well. I want to thank the leader for how he introduced this. In the narrow way, it is absolutely about one decision, yes or no, for a joint committee. But inevitably, the past and the present and the future are all entangled in this, and we've heard speakers speak from a distance, Andrea Luxford-Vaughan, and perhaps some others, about their reservations, about the whole project and the background for it. I was more involved with that representing this council than some, and I can see from the inside the challenges. We know where that ended up. That has nothing to do with the decision we face tonight. It should have little to do with the future. We have a fresh opportunity, and it's an opportunity we can take. It has a challenge inherent in it, but tonight's decision is about proceeding with others, with all the opportunities that provides, or not. And I'm really clear that the right thing to do, the most effective thing to do, the one way in which we'll have influence and represent the needs and interests of the people of Colchester, including those who feel it's not something to welcome but something to feel threatened by. The only way you can represent their interests is by having a voice. As Councillor Oxford said, having a seat at the table. So I give full-hearted support for this and welcome what follows. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor King. Our next speaker is Councillor Buston, please.
Mr. Mayor, thank you very much indeed for giving me the opportunity to speak. I wish to record that I support our becoming members of this joint committee. Whether or not one may actually approve of the concept of garden communities. Just a few points on this. First of all, I'd like to record our thanks to the officers that took their time to give us such an admirable briefing on the subject just such a short while ago. It's a very complex subject, and frankly, most of us don't know as much about it as we need to in order to make such far-reaching decisions. This is going to be something that's going to be with us, as others have noted, for 50, 60, 70 years. Most of us will be deep underground or wherever we're going by the time it comes to fruition and finishes. So what we do now in relation to the foundations is extremely important. So I think it's right, if we're offered a seat at the table, which by the look of it we are, that we should take that and participate fully. Just one thing I do find slightly bizarre, if I can put it in as an aside, and it's simply an aside. I noticed that when we were considering the application for West Tay at that time, there wasn't a great cry put forward that the councillors representing Copford and Marks Tay should be offered special seats at the table. And I would have supported them having such a seat at the table, but I find it strange that we're now only just thinking about this. Anyway, moving on from that, I'd just like to sum up by echoing what Councillor Gerard Oxford said, and I think he said it extremely well. You've got to have a seat at the table. If you don't have a seat at the table, you will not get represented. And frankly, that's what we are all here to do, irrespective of whatever tribe we belong to. We are here to represent the folk of Colchester. And if they don't get a proper representation, then we are not doing our duty. Please be inside the tent, doing whatever you do out, rather than outside the tent, doing whatever you do in. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Buston. We have 5 more speakers on my list, the next one being Councillor Hagan, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Leader, for introducing this motion. Brilliantly put. I just want to echo pretty much what many people have said here this evening. This is an opportunity to ensure that we have the ability to have a say in the development of what's going to be up to 9,000 plus homes. Right on our doorstep. And we've seen time and time again in Stanway where we want to try and do things properly, but unfortunately there's been one party not taking part and infrastructure has been lacking and houses have been coming and won't stop. basically. And we've got this opportunity here to be part of something that allows us to do this differently. Now, I understand the reservations of local councillors in that area that say that it's going to impact them the most. Well, actually, it's going to impact all of the residents across Colchester, not just in those areas. And if anybody was to have a seat at the table, well, perhaps we should all have a seat at the table. Just as an example, if you come off the new link road, you're going to be hitting the A120, then onto the A12 and through my ward in Stanway. And certainly we know how busy that can get on a Sunday morning as a new store just opens. But that seems to be all resolved now, which is good. Again, look, we've got this opportunity to do something right from the beginning, and however long that lasts for, we need to grab every opportunity to have an input and a say. And I do support this. I think it's absolutely brilliant for Colchester. Would we have said the same with Marks Tay? Possibly, possibly not. We're not going to know that. But certainly for this particular development, let's get round the table with our partners and do the best for our residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hagan. Councillor Barber, please, next.
Thank you, Chairman. A really important item that's come to full council this evening. As I believe now the longest continuous serving member of the local plan committee, I feel I've spent many of an evening discussing this topic, and I share many of the comments that Councillor Dundas made about how I have reservations about the project. My views on it are well known, and I certainly also mirror I was going to mirror some of the comments that Councillor Buston made as well, about how important it is to have a seat at the table, the same as Councillor Oxford. So it is a really important matter to be discussing this evening. And one of the reasons why I wanted to speak on this is because it's a point that I've made at Cabinet and also in our private briefing about how important it is that ultimately the decision-making does come back to full council ultimately. And if we are unsatisfied with how this matter progresses over many years, years that will pass beyond us all here, no doubt. I'm sure when this project is completed, few, if any of us, will be still elected to this authority, such as the long time span that it goes under. So we do have a duty here by setting up this committee to make sure that Colchester Borough Council is always represented in issues that are going to have a major impact on our residents. And like I said, I have deep reservations about the project. In fact, little I've seen so far has probably reassured me about the direction the project is likely to take. But ultimately, this project has been approved by full council. I didn't support section 1 being adopted. However, council did support it. And therefore, we have to deal with the hand that we've been given. This new administration has to deal with the hand it's been given. So ultimately, I do see benefits in setting up a committee on these terms. And what full council giveth, it can taketh away. And I do feel that's ultimately the big part of why I do support how this is being structured, because ultimate sovereignty, for want of a better phrase, on these matters can be returned to full council, and that's a really important principle because it safeguards. It's easy, isn't it? When you're in charge, your party's in charge, you can make decisions, and it's easy to be, we're going to be in charge for ages, and therefore this system's working for us, and that's excellent. But ultimately, democracy is making sure you have those checks and balances. And I'm really pleased to see a system that does have those checks and balances, so all members ultimately retain that authority to have control on such a major impacting project. And that's why I do support it, because I see those safeguards in place. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Barber. Councillor Goss, please.
Thank you. It's really important we are heard. It's really important we try and influence what happens, particularly as all this is going to be on our borders, because potentially we'll get all the damage, but none of the benefit, because we'll have the residents using our facilities. And if we don't have a seat at the table, the impact could be a lot worse. And if we influence it and if we work with tendering, then what we need to do is get the best that we can possibly get for the residents of Colchester that are existing, and of course the future community. And as has been outlined, this is at least a 30-year programme of house building, and the figure of houses is between 7,000 and 9,000. It's not been settled. I hope it's the lower figure. I've always hoped it was the lower figure, but this is an important project. Part 1 of the plan is approved, and the important thing to remember when Part 2 of the plan comes to full council, if that falls, that could also undo part one. It could also undo the housing numbers. So whilst we're being a little bit more strategic tonight, let's also have that fact in the back of our minds, because I only ever deal in facts, as you know, but I will absolutely support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Goss. Councillor Hogg, and then finally Councillor Tim Young.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is, as has been said, a very long, or first step on a very long journey, and just to cheer Councillor Buston up, I intend to be here in 30 years' time just to cheer everybody up. This is very important that we do have a seat at this table, particularly those of us who have campaigned against development in on the borders, particularly St John's and Grinstead residents. My past history of talking to developers gives me cause for concern, as I've already said in this chamber before. When a developer says to you, looks you in the eye and says, "Don't worry, councillor, we can wait," it makes me nervous. So we need to be on board here. We need to be part of this. As for those reasons, I should be supporting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hogg. And finally, Councillor Young. Tim.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And can I also thank Ms O'Connell and Mr Marchant for their intelligent and thoughtful contributions tonight. James often emails us regularly with updates on what his organisation are doing, and grateful for those. They're very interesting. If I can just address Councillor Buston's comments. We never reached the stage of a joint committee for West Tay, but if we had, then I would have fully supported one of the local ward members sitting on any joint committee. So I hope he takes that on board. And whenever we mention up to 9,000 homes, it scares people. They're not going to appear overnight. It's going to be over decades, and it will be well planned if we have anything to do with it. So we've got to take that into account. And whatever imagined evils certain people think about the potential of the garden community, we'll only ever hear the negatives. There's some wonderful positives that could happen. It's a huge opportunity for new sustainable jobs, new sustainable homes in a well-designed sustainable development. This could be the future of development, because I agree with Councillor Fox. I think the planning system is broken and needs fundamental reform, and hopefully a future government will do something about that. But we are where we are with what we've got, and we've got to move forward with this huge opportunity that we have. So I really fully support the setting up of a joint committee, because as everybody has said, you've got to have some influence and not be shouting from afar. That's just not on, and it's not the way Colchester does things. But even if, and I think Grinstead councillors should be represented on that joint committee, even if they're not, we will find a way of having our say and influence, because it does deeply impact our ward, and it deeply impacts the future of our borough. But our ward in particular will be affected, and that's why I think we should set up this joint committee and work in partnership with Essex and tendering to make this the best possible development we can. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Right, thank you, Councillor Young. Councillor Dundas, you have 3 minutes to sum up, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Lots of very good comments there, and I'd like to thank everybody who's contributed, members of the public and councillors. Just to pick up on a few things, particularly something Councillor Willett said about the way it's been done in the past. I think the mistake was made was just how much was done in private. And if you do things in secret meetings and there aren't public minutes and the public can't attend, it always fosters suspicion as to what's going on. And I've actually been quite uneasy that's continued with the steering group, that nobody really knows what's going on there, and it's all confidential and everything. One of the pleasing things about this committee is it will be a committee in the conventional sense. It will be in public. There will be public minutes. Public and visiting councillors will be able to attend and speak on items just like they can with our planning committee or our local plan committee or full council. So I would expect to see, or hope to see, what's going on in the steering group quite rapidly transfer to the new joint committee. And I think it being out in the open will really help everybody feel a lot more confident about that. But overall, look, nothing is perfect. This isn't perfect. We'd have preferred 5 places each. We got 3. I'd probably prefer a committee guarantee by the Secretary of State, but we haven't the time to do that, and our partners didn't agree with that approach. We've pushed our case as hard as we can. We've won some arguments, we've lost others. No doubt the debate will continue, and it will evolve over time. TCPGC is not going to go away. You know, not having a committee won't mean it all ends or anything. So it is about, as we've said, do we want to be involved or not? And we also have to think about the future. It's not about us, it's about our successors. It's about the people who will be sitting here in 20 or 30 years' time. If we don't take part now, how will they look at us? And I'll tell you this, the committee might not last the course, but if you're not in at the beginning, we won't be there at the middle, and we certainly won't be there at the end. And if we have 0 seats, we'll be outvoted every time. So I used a bad musical analogy when I introduced the motion. I'm afraid I'm going to use another one. I don't know anybody who, if you've seen or listened or watched on streaming thing, the musical Hamilton, which was also about a form of mutualisation. But to paraphrase, the question this evening is, do we want Colchester to be in the room when it happens? I think we do.
Good. Thank you very much, Councillor Dundas. So we've had a good debate and a lot of very positive comments. Can we put this to the vote by hands, please? So all those in favour of setting up a committee? I think that's unanimous. Anybody against? Oh, I beg your pardon. 1, thank you. That means the recommendation is carried and the committee will be set up. And can I just say, Colchester's had a long history of their local plan having cross-party support. We all have the responsibility of delivering this housing, and I think it's important that all the parties accept the responsibility. And I think by working with tendering and county as well, that will continue, and hopefully for the benefit of Colchester as well. Thank you. Right, the next item is item 2, Local Council Tax Support Scheme 22-23. I'd like to invite Councillor Lissimore to speak for up to 5 minutes and move motion C.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I shall not speak for long on this. I move that the recommendation contained in draft minute 608 of the Cabinet meeting of the 17th of November 2021 be approved and adopted. As the councillors know that are here, we have spoken about this issue a number of times before at different committees and at Cabinet, and it is the scheme which has already helped 9,500 residents by helping them by reducing their council tax. It is one of the most generous in our area, and I would like to thank the officers once again for all the work that they do. It really is a very excellent scheme. We have looked at it in detail and decided now is not the right time to revise it or to reduce the money going into it. And so I wish to say tonight I will be voting to approve it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lissimore. Sorry, Councillor Corey, you would wish to speak. 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll be very short, but I've commented at scrutiny and at Cabinet about this, and just wanted to say that I support this policy going through as it is. It does help the most in need in our borough, and always has done, and been more generous than many others. I remain concerned, however, though, over the next year or so, we're seeing a real crisis in the cost of living, and it will get worse, so we do need to keep constant review. But I'm grateful that our staff are excellent in this area, absolutely excellent, led by Jason Granger, who I'm sure Councillor Lissimore has spent many hours with going through this policy. I thank him and the team underneath him, and feel at least satisfied that they will do their best to help our residents, and that we have emergency housing payments and discretionary housing payments which will help, that we contribute to. But I still am concerned going forward with the cost of living squeeze on our residents, so we need to do even more to support them going forward, I feel. But thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor King, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's been said, I'll be even briefer. This is a scheme we can be proud of. I want to put it in that kind of way. When we're in financial pressured times, both for individuals but also for us as an organisation, the decision to stick with this is not a small one. There is a significant cost for us, but the burden and the pressure on individuals deserves our support, and it's great that we're doing it. So I draw attention to the significance of the decision we're making, to the thousands of people we have before, and we continue to help in the way that's set out in the paper. I urge us to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor King. If there are no further speakers, Councillor Lismore, would you like to sum up?
I'd just like to thank the councillors for their comments, and I think we should go to the vote.
And we'll go to the vote. All those in favour, please.
It's unanimous, Mr. Mayor.
Right. Unanimous, and as councillors, we should be proud that we are supporting Colchester residents in difficult times. The next item is Officer Pay Policy Statement 22-23, and again, Councillor Lismore, please, to move motion D.
Again, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I move that the recommendations contained in draft minute 609 of the Cabinet meeting of the 17th of November 2021 be approved and adopted. Again, I shall not speak for long on this. The Localism Act requires us to pass this, so I would suggest that, unless anybody wants to speak on it, that we just go to the vote. Thank you.
We have Councillor Fox. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor. As recent full council meetings have often not had us the opportunity to ask questions to portfolio holders at the end, I thought I might take the lead of my former colleague, Councillor Liddy, who at this time of year used to ask the portfolio holder to express their thanks for all the hard work of officers. Yet again, it's been a very difficult year for local residents, and for the council in terms of its delivery of services. COVID has taken its toll again this year, and we know just how hard officers have been working on the front line to support our residents. And I think this is just the right time that as a full council we ought to place on record our thanks to officers for all their hard work. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Fox. I'd certainly support that too. Councillor Lismore, would you like to sum up, please?
Thank you. Yes. Our officers have been through a very tough year again, and yes, certainly would like to thank them for their dedication over the last couple of years, where times, have been very tough. So thank you for that, and we should move to the vote. Thank you.
All those in favour, please. And nobody against? No, unanimous. Thank you very much. And we go to the next item, which is item 4, nominations for Deputy Mayor 22-23. Councillor Dundas, you have 5 minutes for motion
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that the
sorry, have you got a declaration of interest, Councillor Moore? No? Okay, carry on, Councillor Dundas.
Thank you. I move that the recommendation contained in draft minute 614 of the Cabinet meeting of the 17th of November 2021 be approved and adopted, and Councillor Jowers be nominated as the Deputy Mayor of the Borough of Colchester for the 22-23 municipal year. Mr. Mayor, I won't need the 5 minutes because I know other people I think will probably want to speak, but I'm just going to say a couple of things. Councillor Jowers, 24 years as a borough councillor, by far and away the longest serving councillor who has not yet been mayor. Well, sorry, deputy mayor, beg your pardon, good point. A past leader of the council, held past portfolio holder in several areas, and of course, also, I suppose I have to mention this, a long-standing county councillor and former chair of Essex County Council. And he's done all this whilst living abroad. Quite amazing, really. But seriously, Councillor Jowers, John, a very respected councillor who has an air of authority, I think very few councillors have. And it's not just him who says that. seriously, he's someone, I think when he speaks, though, everyone in the council listens to and everyone respects. And I think that makes him the perfect choice as mayor, because that's really pretty much the definition of the job. I know he and Sue will do a fantastic job supporting Tim and Nicola over the next year and subsequently as mayor and mayoress. It's much deserved and, dare I say, overdue. Although perhaps the only thing I might recommend, and this is perhaps a bit of advice for the civic office, you might need to get used to picking up the phone again rather than emailing when you need to contact him urgently. Thank you.
Oh, very pertinent point. Thank you, Councillor Dundas. So we have speakers. We have Councillor Bentley, followed by Councillor Buston to start with.
Mr. Mayor, thank you very much indeed. I certainly have a declaration of interest. I know him very well. And most of us are going to think at last that we have John Jowers going to be up there as Deputy Mayor and hopefully Mayor as well. I just want to cast people's minds back to the 1990s. Many of us were much younger, and certainly there was one very young, keen BBC television reporter who was assigned to a job for a by-election at Colchester Borough Council for the very marginal seat of West Mersey. And I remember saying to my producers at the time, are you absolutely sure? I've gone through the records and, you know, the majorities look pretty healthy for the Conservative Party. No, we must do it. It was the mid-1990s and there might be an upset. So off I went and did my best Jeremy Paxman impression, and I interviewed all the candidates at length, and we did a big piece on Look East that night, and then we waited for the big day itself, and out came the result. And everyone was wondering, will there be a big upset? And the upset was there was an even bigger thumping majority than we'd had before. So, John, of course, has been a stalwart, really, of this organisation and of this local authority, serving in many different capacities, as you've heard the leader say. His portfolios, he was leader. I had the privilege of serving in his cabinet when he was leader. He then went off to join the county council and held for a number of years, over a decade, a very good portfolio there. And he brought in the Community Initiative Fund, which he'd invented here in Colchester and took it to the county. It still runs today and is extremely good, and it helps our communities directly. Whatever those communities are, whatever the needs are, that's money that goes directly into those. And John should have great credit for that, of inventing it here and taking it to the county. He then went on, of course, to become chairman and a very good chairman of the County Council for 2 years. And it's something that is not an easy job to do, as I'm sure Mayor is not an easy job to do. It's enjoyable, but not an easy job to do. Great call on your time. But I know John will do the most tremendous job along with Susan as well, and a great support for our incoming Mayor and the Mayoress, and making sure that the true traditions of this borough are upheld. And all I can say is, despite all that's gone before, he still enjoys those thumping majorities. Mr. Mayor, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bentley. Councillor Buston, please.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Mayor. John was leader of our group when I first was elected to this council in the year 2000. Thanks, or not thanks, to Councillor Bentley, who cajoled me into the job. No, you'll never win. I did, sadly, for many, but I'm pleased to be here. John came from that stable of councillors who, sadly, we don't see quite so much nowadays, who volunteered to become a councillor as a representative of the people that he actually represented, and not for the purpose of either self-aggrandizement or indeed to develop a career. Nonetheless, his ability and his leadership qualities have shone through and have seen him through, not only as leader here, but also as an extremely effective and good chairman of Essex County Council. It is therefore, to my mind, most fitting that he should now be offered the honour of being Colchester's first citizen, including Mersey. I've no doubt whatsoever that he will bring to this job great honour, style, dignity, and presence, as well as an amazing eloquence. I support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Buston. Councillor Moore, please.
Thank you very much. I must say how delighted I am that John Jowers has been proposed for the job of Deputy Mayor and in the fullness of time to be Mayor. John has served Mersey, the borough, and the county for as long as I can remember. I've got a bad memory, but it's been a long time. It's not for nothing that he's known as Mr. Mersey. He's the first person people turn to on Mersey. I often think that I'm sort of getting involved in an issue, and I find, oh no, we've spoken to John about that, which is excellent, really. It's good for me, and it's good for Mersey, because he has a knowledge of everything that's going on locally, in the borough, and in the county that is absolutely second to none. On a personal note, I still miss not hearing his voice commentating on Mersey Town Regatta Day from the barge and hearing this wonderful tones, probably a bit more Mersey than usual, but it was wonderful, and everybody stopped and listened to everything that he had to say, and I do miss that. I have absolutely no doubt that he will bring both dignity and humour to the role, and that Sue will be an admirable deputy mayoress and in full-time mayoress. I thoroughly commend John for the post.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. The next one is Councillor Tim Young, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And as the current Deputy Mayor, can I say to Councillor Jowers, it is great fun being Deputy Mayor to Robert and Liz. They are doing a wonderful job. I think we all appreciate that, and being their deputies is marvellous. So congratulations to them, and I'm sure we'll get a chance to say that next year as well. Yeah, I think I support this. JJ and I go back a long way, 24 years, that's nothing, is it? But John and I have got on very well over the years, and I'm sure he will be, I'm trying to be a loyal and humble deputy. Loyalty doesn't come too badly to me. Humility, I'm sure he will find that as easy as I do, being a loyal and humble deputy to the mayor. But it will be great fun. It will be great fun. It will be hard work. It is hard work. Robert and I know that. The number of engagements is going up again after COVID. And when John speaks, he does capture the whole chamber, or Charter Hall in this case, and he will have that natural authority that he brings to everywhere he goes, and when John speaks, people listen. We look forward to working with you and Sue, John, and you certainly have our support and the support, I think, of the Labour group as well to be Deputy Mayor for next year, and we'll have to get together very soon, maybe in the new year, and have a chat. So, yeah, very, very glad to support this nomination tonight.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Young. Councillor Gerard Oxford, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Philip, Beverley and I were absolutely chuffed when we heard John's name being announced for Deputy Mayor. And we went, yep, absolutely. And I'm going to be cheeky now by saying, well, he has served his apprenticeship having been Chairman of Essex, and then now he'll be in line for the top job. So we'll absolutely support his nomination with bells on. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Oxford. The next speaker we have is Councillor Hagan, followed by Councillor Hazel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to support Councillor Jowers for appointment as Deputy Mayor. I'm a new councillor. I haven't known John as long as many of you, but being a candidate, what seemed to be for about 20 years, you'd walk into that chamber on those group meetings with all these wonderful ideas of changing the world, and you want to have your say. You listen to John's voice and you go, he knows his stuff. He's the guy we need to be listening to for the experience that you're going to learn. And many leaders in our group have certainly, you can tell, taken that experience on board. I certainly have. And I hope that the new councillors that come in will certainly take that on board as well. So, yes, I support the nomination. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hagan. Councillor Hazel, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I was just adding up. I have known John now for nearly 20 years, from when I first became involved in local politics, and I am amazed that these years have gone by so quickly. I so enjoyed listening to Councillor Jowers in the chamber. His debating prowess is second to none. He is a wise and practical man, always approachable for advice, with a willingness to share his knowledge and experience. He is a special man, Mr. Mayor, and Councillor Jowers will be a worthy representative of Colchester and its residents, and I fully support his nomination. Thank you very much.
Good. Thank you, Councillor Hazel. Councillor Goss, please.
It's an absolute pleasure to support Councillor Jowers. He is extremely well respected and well read, and the Lib Dem group fully support his nomination. I do always joke about Councillor Jowers opening the John Jowers retirement home, and I'm sure that will actually happen one day. But well done, John. I know you've had to put this back when you were chairman of Essex County Council, but I'm very pleased that you stood for election and you obviously won and now have that chance to fulfil the role after 24 years. And no doubt working with Tim Young will be an excellent partnership, and I'm sure it will bring much money for charity across Colchester. So well done and congratulations.
Thank you, Councillor Goss. Councillor Fox, please.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I just wanted to place on record the Labour Group's support for Councillor Jowers to be the Deputy Mayor next year. Certainly, on my time on the Council, John's always brought a wealth of knowledge and experience, as others have said, and I'm sure there'll be plenty of opportunity in the future to speak more about all of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fox. And lastly, Councillor Chapman, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I totally support this, obviously. The qualities John has got have been, well, covered by everybody else before me, so I won't go into that. But I do suspect that possibly I'm the person that's known him the longest in the, certainly in the council, and probably in this room, I guess. He did used to wield a spoon in my direction from time to time. It's not the thing to say really these days. It's totally inappropriate, but he did used to land on my head from time to time. He was my table prefect at lunch at school, and I've known him ever since then. We've worked together on the Borough Council as I was his group leader. We were in the cabinet together, that wonderful coalition cabinet this council once had with all three parties in it, that I think did a lot of good work in the town. And I was always pleased to work in that cabinet with him. As I said before, the qualities have been enumerated by everybody before me, so I won't go into those again, but I think it's a wonderful opportunity for John as a former mayor myself. It's a great thing to do, to be mayor of Colchester, and in due course I will no doubt welcome him as a former mayor, but he's got a wonderful year as deputy mayor, following Tim, wonderful years mayor after that, and so I'm delighted to be able to support you, John.
Thank you very much, Councillor Chapman. As mayor, I'd quite like to just say a few words too, if you don't mind. And they're all complimentary, John, so don't worry. But I think we go back quite a long way, and of course it's not just council business, it's the fact that we both work on Mersey. We both know lots of families there. As Councillor Moore said, you are Mr. Mersey, and you've earned your reputation as a working fisherman, as a advisor to so many local groups, but also, of course, as mayor of Mersey for many years. I forget, 3-4 years as mayor, and so mayor of Mersey, mayor of Colchester, and chairman of the county. Not a bad innings, really. And you've still got a lot more to give. I think that's the thing I'd like to say. That when you joined in the mid-90s, of course, it was committee system. You went straight on to development control at that stage because you wanted to influence what happened in Mersey, in Colchester and Mersey. And then you've always had an interest in planning. You've led our group on the local plan through 1, 2 or 3 local plans, I think, in that time. And he's got this wonderful gift of being able to work with others. And I think we could all learn from that. The only thing we haven't learned from him is how on earth we can get a wardrobe as colourful and as elegant as his. Because he certainly shows us up when he turns up for important events. But John, I hope you and Sue have a wonderful 2 years as Deputy Mayor and Mayor, and I look forward to supporting your charities too. Councillor Dundas, would you like to sum up, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can't really follow any of those. I must admit, I did wonder where Councillor Chapman was going with this speech at one point. I was very pleased when the explanation came. Yeah, I can't really follow those comments. I won't try to. But so I think we should move straight to the vote, which sounds like it probably won't be a very controversial one.
All those in favour, please.
That's unanimous, Mr. Mayor.
Congratulations, John. I think it would be fair to ask Councillor Jowers if he would like to respond to those various compliments.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I don't really recognise the person that was being spoken about. In fact, interesting really, because if I was to mention Mavis and double egg and chips, most people here wouldn't know what the hell I was talking about. But some of the older ones definitely do. This was those marvellous days in the town hall when we had restaurant down below and you could come in at 6 o'clock off the London train and you would get fed and watered. But you could also talk to your colleagues and to members of the other groups. And we all lived very happily under Uncle John Cobley and all. And like an old Rolls Royce, you know, with the springs sagging a bit and the paintwork faded. But we bumbled along until, lo and behold, we had that amazing, eclectic new broom of the blessed Andrea. And do you know what we got as a bonus with the Andrea? Kind of a Christmas present, really. It was some thrusting young chap called Adrian. And actually, he was appointed at the same time, and he's done us proud. But effectively, it's about the town. It's about the locality. It's where we live. It's the people we've lived with. And Paul Dundas only made one mistake. It's actually the independent Republic of Mersey, Paul. You know, we have a passport as you come across the street, if you can get across it. Nigel, I didn't realise how much sense I'd beaten into you as your prefect. But, you know, that again is historical, really, as it shows that behaviours change. But actually, in a council like this, behaviours don't change. I would wish that we had more contact between groups, as we used to have. Hoggy would come and tell us what their best odds were on the racing that day. Usually wrong. And we had some phenomenal characters and some very good officers, which we still have, actually. So it's the honour, really, and it's, in a sense, rising above an ideology and realising that you need to represent the communities you live in. It's so important. And sometimes we forget that our tourism isn't dead in Colchester. It's an amazing town, and it's an honour to be able to represent it, possibly. So thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
And now it's rather appropriate, we're going to talk about the Gambling Act. So would Councillor Buston like to move motion F, please?
Mr. Mayor, thank you very much indeed. Members, ladies and gentlemen. Agenda item 7.5, Gambling Act 2005, policy motion F. I move that the recommendation contained in draft minute 143 of the Licensing Committee meeting of the 10th of November 2021 be approved and adopted. The main event of the evening. Members will remember that I've spoken on these matters before, and members will probably remember that it is incumbent upon us as a local authority to review certain of our policies that have a quasi-judicial function, particularly every number of years. And in relation to gambling, it's every 3 years. This review is carried out by our officer team, which very ably has a calendar and make sure it's done and done on time and done properly. It also involves not only the production of a new draft policy, but also conducting a consultation. That consultation has been effected. As perhaps you might imagine, there's been very little feedback to the consultation, but responses were received from the Essex Police, who confirmed that they're happy with the document. Councillor Nick Cope kindly replied, and Essex County Council Child and Adult Safeguarding Services. Suggestions were made, particularly by the latter, in relation to the wording of the policy, and suggested a new licensing objective, which the law does not permit. Nonetheless, that didn't stop the wording of the policy being tailored, which has now resulted in the new policy produced. I'm not going to go any further into this unless members would like me to, and I invite any members that have got any questions to submit them. Thank you.
Councillor Buston, I think we can move straight to the vote, if that's agreeable with you. Do you need to sum up? Oh, I beg your pardon. Councillor Moore wishes to speak.
Just as Deputy Chair of Licensing, I would like to add my thanks to the officers who have steered this into fruition and made it readable and acceptable. I would like to thank them very much. Thank you.
Do you need to sum up, Councillor Buston?
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Mayor. Apart from thanking Councillor Moore for what she said, and also, frankly, thanking the other group representatives and the other members of the Licensing Committee who always attend upon their duties with the committee on a very non-partisan and therefore a very professional basis, which goes towards what Councillor Giles was just talking about, talking to each other and participating. Only by doing that do we get a professional result. And as a result of that, we get a professional result in licensing, which I commend to members. Thank you.
Good. In that case, we'll go to the vote. All those in favour, please. Another unanimous vote. Excellent. Now, councillors, we've been going for 1 hour and 27 minutes. I suggest that we have a 10-minute break. Is that agreeable? I believe there are hot drinks and some mince pies left over at the back of the by the cafe, if you wish to help have those. See you back here in 10 minutes. Are we ready, councillors? Excellent. So, Councillor Willits, if you could move motion H, please, which is number 7 on the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it makes more sense to do H before J so that we know what the Code of Corporate Governance is before we look at the policies. I move the recommendation contained in draft minute 2902 of the Governance and Audit meeting 23rd of November be approved and adopted. Colchester Code of Corporate Governance is the means by which the Council demonstrates that its structures comply with the recognised principles of good governance. Now, the national guidance identifies 6 core principles, sometimes called the Nolan Principles, against which authorities should review their existing corporate governance arrangements. And governance is defined as the systems, processes, cultures, values by which the Council is directed, controlled, and scrutinised. Now, looking forward in the agenda to motion 8.2 on standards, it paints a very rosy picture of selfless public service by local councillors, sharply contrasted with shocking misconduct within national government. But I would suggest, Mr. Mayor, that that is not so. My first recollection of local government as a youth in the 1970s was the T-Dan Smith and Poulsen trials, where the leader of Newcastle City Council was jailed for 6 years for corruption. Pick up the Liverpool Daily Paper for today and little has changed, Mr. Mayor. The past leader arrested on suspicion of conspiracy to commit bribery, witness intimidation, and many of his friends under investigation for other offences. And it's not only the Labour Council leaders who've strayed from the straight and narrow. Take a look at the Transparency International UK website and you'll see the complete list, some of which are nearer to home. So our code of corporate governance is about how we, as councillors, ensure our council is doing the right thing, in the right way, for the right people, in a timely, inclusive, open and accountable manner, with highly effective scrutiny to hold our decision makers to public account. It focuses on the Nolan Principles, the purpose of the council, councillors and officers working clearly with the defined functions, promoting good governance, taking informed and transparent decisions, developing the capacity and capability of members, and ensuring robust public accountability. The existing code is reviewed annually to ensure that the council is satisfying these Nolan Principles. The local code presented to council today is shown on page 255 of the order paper, and it has been updated, Mr. Mayor, to reflect the strategic priorities for investment, the COVID recovery plan, along with the commitment to continue developing hybrid meeting processes and to enable greater public engagement with the work of the council. Otherwise, there have been no significant changes to the local code following the review, and it is considered by the Governance and Audit Committee still fit for purpose. I commend the revised code to council. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Willits. I'd like to think that Colchester is a better run council than some of those you were mentioning, and I think we need to concentrate on Colchester today. Anybody want to speak, or shall we go to the vote? No, go to the vote then. All those in favour, thank you.
It's unanimous, Mr. Mayor.
And Councillor Willits, perhaps you'd like to kindly do number 6 now. Thank you. That's G.
I move the recommendation contained in the draft minute 290 of the Governance and Audit meeting of the 23rd of November that it be approved and adopted. Having outlined in the past item why we have governance, a governance code to ensure that this council is well managed, we then look at the detail, which are the ethical governance policies. They are key policies which set out in detail the standards of conduct and integrity that the council expects of councillors, staff, partners, suppliers, even volunteers, Mr. Mayor, when conducting council business. They contain the procedures for dealing with breaches of the policies and the processes to be followed in any investigation so that it's absolutely fair and transparent. The Governance and Audit Committee has reviewed the following policies to ensure that they remain fit for purpose and no significant changes are proposed. And these policies are shown on pages 163 to 251 of the order paper. And they are the anti-fraud and corruption policy, whistleblowing policy, anti-money laundering policy, covert surveillance policy, the social media RIPA policy, data protection policy, acceptable use policy, information security policy, retention of document policy, and the income and debt management policy. Any breaches of these policies will be pursued. Procedures have been introduced to enable any person to raise genuine concerns that they may have about the conduct of anybody acting on behalf of the council. And we have a zero tolerance of fraud, corruption, and bribery. The policies are a constant reminder of the ethical standards which I hope we all hold dear. The table on table 4.1 on page 160 of the order paper indicates the number of times each policy has been invoked in the past year. Reassuringly, Mr. Mayor, there have been very few occasions in recent years and none during the immediate year. The monitoring officer writes an annual letter to all members and officers reminding them of their obligations under the anti-fraud and corruption and whistleblowing policies. And councillors, of course, receive appropriate training such as data protection and cyber security, where training was delivered very recently to bolster the effectiveness of these policies. Finally, following any changes to the office holder of leader of the council, we ask the incoming leader to refresh the statement of intent on ethical government policies. The current statement signed by Councillor Dundas is shown on page 162 of the order paper. So I commend to Council the current version of the ethical governance policies which we, the Governance Committee, have reviewed and to which I refer for inclusion in the Council's policy framework. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Willits. If there are no speakers, we'll go to the... Oh, hang on. Councillor Buston wishes to speak. 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wish to indicate that I support the general thrust and the general principle of the Council's policies and where they're going and why. However, as with all of these things, there is some devil in the detail. And the comment that I wish to bring forward before full council in relation to this is in relation to IT security. And I have mentioned this on a number of occasions. It is my belief and understanding that the reaction that the council is currently taking and imposing in relation to members and their access to councillors' mail and it being forwarded to them is unnecessary. And it is quite possible in this day and age, in 2021, for the security aspects of this to be dealt with adequately and sorted out without councillors having to either have a council laptop at great expense to the taxpayer, or indeed have their own laptops that they wish to use compromised by using the council's systems. Now, I've been to a number of the meetings of the committee, and this has been raised on a number of occasions, and I haven't seen any progress towards developing how councillors may still have their emails forwarded to them without a security risk to the council at all, when I was given to understand that this was on the work schedule. I would like that followed up, please, because I think it would not only save the council money, but it would make the life of the councillor, who is at the end of the day a volunteer, somewhat easier than otherwise. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So perhaps, Councillor Willits, could you sum up and tackle those points?
Certainly, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Buston has made his views known on several occasions, and there is a degree of support for those views amongst councillors, particularly those who receive their or would like to receive their mail via their business or work systems. In a nutshell, Mr. Mayor, the borough council systems are reasonably simple, and they're off-the-shelf Microsoft systems. They operate on what Councillor Buston will know is called System High, where there is no distinction at all between users and the information that they have access to. Therefore, for every email that passes through the council system, we have to assume that it contains elements of the most sensitive information held by the council, although we know it won't do, but we have to make that assumption for purposes of good security. And we have to have access control, which is appropriate to protecting the most sensitive items, which are normally dealt with by the council system. And therefore, the access arrangements do have to be robust and provably sound. It has been suggested that the councillor's email system could be separated from the officer's email system, which would enable councillors to have perhaps less harsh policies in regard to how they send and collect their email if it didn't in any way hazard the security of the more sensitive information, such as personal benefit information. But that will cost time and money. So while it is an objective, I cannot give Councillor Buston assurance that it will be done in the very near future. But I do commend the policies all the same to the council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Willits. And as a forensic analyst, I think we should take note of your comments. We are obliged as a council and as councillors to follow government guidance and regulations. So we'll go straight to the vote. All those in favour, please. Right, thank you very much. We now move on to item 8, which is Insulating Homes. This is an executive function which would normally go to Cabinet, but Councillor Young and Corey would like to move Council Procedure 11.2 to allow us to debate it. That is your choice, councillors. So, yeah, can we ask? Would you like this debated? All those in favour of those wanting it debated? Just hold your hands up, please. Yep, okay, it will be debated. Thank you. So, Councillor Young, would you like to propose the motion?
I guess I formally move the motion, Mr. Mayor, and then go into my speech. So I move that the motion on insulating homes, the details of which are at pages 2 to 3 of the supplementary agenda for this meeting, be approved and adopted. Mr. Mayor, the UK has some 29 million homes, and they are the oldest and least energy efficient housing stock in Europe. Every year, vast amounts of precious energy are wasted in heating and increasingly cooling our buildings. In order to meet the UK commitments under the Paris Agreement to stay below 1.5 centigrade and legal obligations under the Climate Change Act 2008 as amended in 2019, emissions from heating and powering homes must be reduced by 78% in less than 15 years, and then to zero by 2050. Nearly 15% of the UK's total emissions comes from heating homes. An overhaul of the energy performance of the UK's housing stock is needed to reduce the energy demand. The UK needs a nationwide programme to upgrade almost every house. The Institution of Engineering and Technology 2018 report, Scaling Up Retrofit 2050, advises that nearly every home in the UK needs to be upgraded with energy efficient measures. That is 1.5 homes per minute to the year 2050. Currently, the UK government does not have a robust long-term national strategy with a funding mechanism in place to retrofit our homes. Each year in the UK, hundreds of thousands of families are forced to choose between heating and eating, cold children or hungry children, and many thousands die because they are too cold. Insulating the homes of Britain will save lives and provide warm homes, while pound for pound making the most effective contribution to reducing carbon and providing meaningful jobs. Insulating Britain is the levelling up agenda writ large. Whilst I don't approve of the disruption Insulate Britain create with some of their action, I do support their demands. The cost of this work, though, Mr. Mayor, is eye-watering. In Colchester, we also have a problem, in so much as our housing stock is more energy efficient than many other areas. So the funding application made to the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund was unsuccessful. We are in effect at the bottom of the pile, and it is likely we will have to wait for other areas to catch up before we are successful in funding bids. We currently have over 900 CBH properties which are rated below a C energy rating. As a responsible authority, we must focus on bringing these properties, which are scattered around the borough, up to a better energy efficient standard. Technology will get cheaper over time to replace boilers and heating systems, but we must focus on insulation to stop the leakage of energy that these homes and others are experiencing. We welcome the launch of the scheme this week, which is targeted at those most in need, but this will not help the thousands of other homes which are not insulated. Many households across Colchester would welcome CBC brokering a procurement deal that could be offered street by street regardless of tenure. Such an approach would really provide social value, deliver economies of scale, and would deliver on the climate change emergency, and of course help with the cost of living crisis that we're all experiencing, with high energy prices being a major contributor to that. We therefore call for support across the chamber to our motion before you this evening. Mr. Mayor, it is disappointing to see the Conservative group's attempts to slaughter this motion. Disappointing, but true to type. I expected a vote to refer to Cabinet, but what we have is a hands over the eyes and ears and some nodding dogs attempting to persuade the people of Colchester that Boris has got it covered. Mr. Mayor, this is the very reason civil disobedience takes place. The blind ignorance that there is nothing to see here and it's all under control is what results in people sitting down on motorways. We know this work will cost millions. We know that we need to do this work to meet our climate change targets swiftly, but we simply do not have the funds to do so. This amendment lets the people of Colchester down. It says to the 900 families that we live in our CBH properties and beyond that they can stay cold, which is hugely disappointing. I urge members to vote for the motion and reject the amendment. Listen to the wisdom of Mr. Sunnock. Vote for motion I.
Thank you, Councillor Young. As you say, there is a main amendment moved by Councillor Barber, so we will hear that now, and then we will put it to see if you're accepting it or not.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that the motion on insulating homes be approved and adopted, subject to the main amendment, the details of which are set out in page 3 of the supplementary agenda for this meeting. Mr. Mayor, I find a bizarre observation to suggest that civil disobedience may occur due to an amendment on a motion at Colchester Borough Council that encourages the advertisement of a scheme that is designed to help the lowest income households in our borough. An excellent scheme that I feel is a great opportunity this evening to advertise and ensure all households that are eligible are aware of this opportunity. Insulating homes is a major issue facing our communities, and it's a two-pronged issue in that, first and foremost, it is having a major impact on our environment. And secondly, it's having a major impact on household budgets. And that's particularly true as we enter a difficult winter after a pandemic. I think that the Green Homes grant scheme is a particularly effective use of investment because it's targeted at the lowest income households and the most energy inefficient homes. And sadly, the insulation cause has been hijacked by a group and groups that really do put it on the back foot. Insulating Homes has got a bad reputation lately because of the actions that have occurred unlawfully and disruptively to many people's lives. But this scheme is an example of good policy. And politics is all about that. It's about doing and about achieving. And I'm sure everybody in this room believes that Insulating Homes is a good cause, particularly for those on the lowest income. And if we all agree that it's a noble goal worth pursuing, I do feel that we have to therefore look at what schemes are available and also come up with a plan to support those ambitious government targets, such as all of privately rented homes being EPC rated Band C by 2030. It's a noble goal, but I do feel every member here would want to see that achieved. And that's because ultimately, by tackling some of these modern problems, we can ensure that no families in 21st century Britain have to make the decision this winter whether to heat their home or have a hot meal. And that's really something that I think that politics is about doing. And it's certainly true that there's eye-watering costs with insulating homes, and that's why I feel the first step is making sure that all households who are low income and have the most energy inefficient households get the support they need. And I really make sure every member here advertises this scheme across their wards that they represent to make sure households are aware that they could be eligible for this funding, as well as landlords have an opportunity to invest in the properties that they rent out to. And I just find it strange that Councillor Young suggests we're slaughtering an amendment. What this is good politics. It's showing that there's schemes out there. Let's advertise them rather than talking. Let's make sure that what's there available, people can use at the end of the day. And I think there is a limit on resources, so targeting the most lowest income households who will struggle to afford replacement insulation, I think is really good policy making. In respect of the target for 2030 for private housing, which I just briefly referred to, that is an ambitious goal, but technology is changing rapidly, and I don't think from the outset we just should say that's not achievable. The government have set it, Essex County Council recognise it in their recent report, and I think Colchester Borough Council should do everything it can to help work towards that and realise some of the technological options out there that are constantly referring. In fact, one problem is technology is changing so fast that some companies are reluctant to invest because soon it could be redundant technology. So we're at a weird stage in dealing with the environmental crisis in that stuff is happening so fast, it can become redundant technology in not too long. So I feel by 2030 it is possible to achieve it. And I think therefore to worry about from the outset that it's not achievable is wrong. If we don't achieve it, then we can reflect and say, well, how do we get on, and what more could we change? But ultimately, if it means some households that are privately rented and they're the least able to move around the market to find energy efficient homes, they're getting high energy bills. And if we can do anything to help these households, I think that's a really noble cause worth pursuing. That's what good politics is. Otherwise, we risk being stale and standing still as the modern world passes us by. So I would urge all members to support the amendment for that goal, and also to show our communities what schemes are out there to really benefit them as we come into what is inevitably going to be a tough winter, sadly. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yep. Thank you, Councillor Barber. Councillor Young, you've heard Councillor Barber's reasoning. Are you prepared to accept that amendment?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. In that case, we now have a debate on the amendment and the main item. So to discuss the whole issue effectively. And Councillor Corey is first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It seems like we need a bit more insulation in here, doesn't it, this evening? Thank you, Councillor Young, for this motion, and a part I helped to work with you on. And I think the motion is clear, thoughtful and straightforward in its aims. The first line says it all. Climate change is the biggest single threat that Colchester residents face and will continue to face, unfortunately, in worsening examples locally. So one of the most simplest actions to take is to insulate our homes. Under the last administration, we did put £4.4 million towards greening our housing stock, but that is one small step, and we need to go much further. We need to go much further than the government policies are currently allowing for as well. Not only for the concerns of the environment and climate emergency we face, but for the cost of living crisis that we face currently, and that will continue to worsen. Better insulation helps tackle the climate emergency, but it helps tackle the vulnerabilities, keeping our most needy people warm and safe, and helps tackle the inequalities burden that we have across our borough and beyond. It cannot be left to the market, and we need to intervene. As I say, the government has offered some policies, but they are a small drop in the ocean, and our oceans are rising. We need to act now. We have talked at the Environment Committee about the scope of our actions and how we in Colchester can take steps, but we need support from government to go further. People on lowest incomes need support, but on middle incomes too, we all need to act together and act now. We must have a plan locally, and that's what this motion talks about, and I'm afraid the amendment does not. We must have a plan, but we cannot just go it alone. As aforementioned, 4.4 million shows our commitment so far into our housing, but we must call upon government to provide additional funding and support to plan for better insulation for all. Just turning to the amendment and Councillor Barber's comments, I disagree with your comments. I actually believe Councillor Young is right, that fudged policies, broken promises on the environment do lead to actions that are taken. Some are peaceful and positive and others go a bit further, but I can understand the anger. Insulation is so simple and so key to protecting and helping many people across this country. Let's go for it. And taking out the energy prices skyrocketing, that's a fact. We have to accept it and we have to help people. I welcome the schemes that are out there, but, and I have communicated them across every bit of social media I can over the last few days. So I've done that, and we take that step, but we must take further steps supported by government. You talk about resources, Councillor Barber. The biggest limit on resources is climate change, and we need to act now. Our planet is burning, and we are all responsible. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Corey. Next speaker is Councillor Scordis, followed by Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And what Councillor Barber calls good politics, I believe he's learnt very well from Essex County Council what I like to call self-congratulatory motions or amendments, which they're very good at congratulating the government at Essex County Council, and Councillor Barber's learnt fast there. I mean, there's many problems with the actual scheme that we talk about, where the government's own Environment Audit Committee has referred to it as botched. And the fact that it's not going fast enough, it's failing to grasp the enormity of the situation we face. And while it's admirable in its idea, it's not meeting its targets. So for that reason, I can't support the amendment from Councillor Barber, but I do thank the Conservative group for allowing us to debate this important issue. To follow on from Councillor Corey and Young about the enormity of the situation we face, many of you are able to go online and view which areas of the UK will be underwater if we fail to reach the target, net zero target of 2030. Much of Colchester will be underwater if we fail to meet that target. And as things stand, we are failing. And just to slightly correct Councillor Young, it's actually 20% of our carbon emissions that housing, heating and lack of insulation causes. So it's a significant number that is an issue. I think one of the biggest issues we do face is around private landlords. Many don't actually live in Colchester at all. Many don't live in Essex. They live far away. Rents are rising for many people, but tenants don't see any improvements. They still have single glazing windows and they have no insulation and repairs are slow. And that's an area that we do really need to work on with our cabinet members here in the positions of I've forgotten where we cabinet members for environment, housing and planning, so councillors Ellis and Crow, that could really work with our department to push this forward, because it's a significant issue. And also issues of our housing associations who still have single glazing window in 2021, which is really scary for some of our poorest residents who depend on help from social housing. So there's a lot of work to do here. I think this is a really important motion. As Councillor Corey said, it's very clear and concise, and I hope that we can agree it as a council.
Yep. Thank you very much, Councillor Scordis. Councillor Whitehead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to say that I find it really deeply disappointing, actually, that the motion has been amended, or that there's an attempt to amend the motion in the way that Councillor Barber has, and particularly that the call for more government support is removed in the amendment and replaced with what is essentially fairly sycophantic praise for the government instead. We passed a climate emergency motion unanimously in this council, and yet it seems that some people still don't seem to get the issue that we're facing. After COP26 in Glasgow, the pledges agreed there, we're still on track for 2.7 degrees of global warming. Before the pledges, the pledges the UK government had made before COP left our emissions 2 times higher than they needed to be for us to reach, to keep to 1.5 degrees. After Glasgow, they're still over 1.5 times higher than we need them to be in order to keep to 1.5 degrees. Even worse, we are way off meeting even those pledges. The head of the UK's own climate change committee, a government body, says the government is nowhere near achieving current targets. Nowhere near achieving current targets. We are in, as I said in my speech when we proposed the climate emergency motion, an emergency situation. I don't know if people grasp the significance of 2 degrees C. The significance largely is that at that point, we risk hitting tipping points, which can lead to runaway climate change, which we simply cannot control. A world way beyond 2 degrees C, 3 degrees C, 4 degrees C. A world that is not habitable in any reasonable sense for our children and our grandchildren. So it's deeply disappointing that the motion is being attempted to be amended in this way. When people moan about the council and say that the council isn't doing its job properly, we often reply and complain to each other with some justification that we have too little power. It's not actually our fault that we can't fix these things because it's not actually in our control. Now, this is true, and this is why at times we should ask for more help from elsewhere. We should lobby the government for more help. We, as a council, who hopefully get it on this issue, should lobby the government, which clearly does not get it on this issue, for more help. And unfortunately, Councillor Barber's amendment shows that he doesn't get it either, I'm afraid. Lobbying is vitally important precisely because it is sometimes the only thing that you can do to affect the situation in the way that it needs to be affected. And that's why there's a motion later on in this agenda, which is very welcome, because it's using the council's position as a public body to lobby in a way that it absolutely should be. Obviously, we will continue to promote the Green Homes Grant. Obviously,
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead.
Final sentence. Obviously, we will implement the government scheme, but there is little point in this motion if it is amended in the way it's trying to be amended tonight.
Thank you very much. The next 2 speakers we've got are Councillor Gocher, followed by Councillor Fox.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One of the problems with COP26 is the way that towards the end of the conference, proposals were watered down by certain parties. And it's something I feel very strongly about with regard to the issue of climate change, that there is a danger that anything that gets proposed gets objected to and watered down because the decisions involved are considered too difficult, too party political, too controversial. And we need to face that down, and we need to challenge it when it occurs, because this is the single greatest problem that's facing the future, and we do need to address it now. And other councillors have talked very well about the potential for tipping points, for levels of temperature increase that will lead to mass flooding in not just the rest of the world, but parts of the south of England. And we need to address this now, and we need to take radical measures. Now, I think this is a very positive motion as originally worded, and I totally support it. In terms of national emissions, the greatest cause of emissions in the UK at the moment isn't actually energy, it's transport. And unless we deal with transport, we will never put this right. But energy is the second single largest source of emissions. And we do need to not only tackle the issue of insulation and also retrofitting boilers and so forth in the future, but do it in a way that doesn't frighten people in terms of cost. And that will require a large amount of funding. There's no getting around that. And I do like the way this motion asks the government to provide additional funding. I don't think that's necessarily a criticism of current government initiatives, but it's saying we need to lobby for increased funding because of the sheer cost that will be involved in this. And especially in doing it in a way that doesn't frighten the public by putting so much additional cost on people on relatively low incomes. So I do support the motion as originally worded, and I don't think it's helpful to just add an amendment that basically it's phrased in a way that is praising current government policy in a manner that I consider to be quite party political. So I will support the motion as originally worded.
Thank you, Councillor Gocher. Followed by Councillor Fox, please.
Thank you very much, Mayor. And I welcome this motion from Councillor Young, supported by Councillor Corey. Just this week, it was reported that rising costs could push up essential family spending by up to £1,700 a year. Inflation is running at 4.2% and set to rise further. Energy bills rising by hundreds of pounds in the coming months. And what this motion does is ask the council to put together a plan to support local families. Unfortunately, we don't have a national retrofitting programme. We don't have a plan to deliver it, a plan that would invest in a workforce and support local families here in Colchester. And let's look at what the Public Accounts Committee have talked about in terms of the government's policies and the Green Homes grant that shut in March of this year. And they said it was a slam dunk fail. They said that it underperformed badly and risks damaging further efforts to achieve net zero. Only 47,500 properties were retrofitted out of a planned number of 600,000 from that fund. It was chaotic, inefficient, and confused. And £50 million of public money was spent on the administration of that programme. So what this motion does is calls for a local plan. And I look forward to hearing from the portfolio holders for the environment and for housing and planning as to why they don't think they should put a plan together tonight. Councillor Young says that the amendment butchers the motion, and it does. It promotes insufficient schemes, it's not ambitious, it fails to take responsibility for the changing circumstances that families and pensioners are experiencing right now in Colchester, and so that's why we need to support the motion as originally intended. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Fox. Our next two speakers are Councillor Ellis and Councillor Dundas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As I mentioned in both the original motion and the main amendment, only seems right I do say a few words, and Adam's just asked that I do so anyway. There are others in this room far better qualified than I to speak about the ongoing work to meet climate change targets within Colchester's housing stock. Councillor Nigel Chapman and Tina Bourne spring to mind, but there will be others too, and I mean no disrespect in not mentioning them. I'm sure they will have something to say this evening. Councillor Barber has spoken
Mr. Mayor, I can barely hear Councillor Ellis. Could he speak up a bit, please?
Sorry, I'm trying to speak into my microphone. I'll try and do better, Councillor Young. Councillor Barber has spoken about the government's Green Homes grant, and no doubt other members may wish to do so as well, hopefully a little bit more positively than I've heard so far. I just want to speak briefly about our own housing stock. Of the 5,800 plus homes that we own, as Councillor Julie Young has said, we have around 900 or 15% which currently fail to meet the energy performance certificate rating of C. 50 of these are in the process of being brought up to a C rating within the current 21-22 programme, and many of the 900 miss scoring a C rating by very few points. As members will see when the updated asset management strategy is published, I hope later this month, CBC working with CBH have a detailed and well thought out plan regarding the continued improvement of the energy efficiency of our housing stock and are well placed against the national average. As I know Councillor Young has been told, we will be adopting a fabric-first approach for the refurbishment and upgrade works being proposed, and insulation is very much a fabric-first approach, which is consistent with the government strategy for getting all properties to an EPC rating of C by 2035 and fuel-poor homes by 2030. Colchester aims to ensure all council homes are EPC C rated by 2030. Energy efficiency is not just about insulation, although it's worth pointing out that the majority of our housing stock has benefited from loft and cavity wall insulation through years of previous capital programme investment, and we continue to work with those who would have to date refused additional insulation. It's a problem that we do face. We're working hard to try and address it. If Councillor Julie Young's motion wishes us to accelerate energy efficiency work, I'd respectfully point out that we're already ahead of the sector and government targets, to the extent, as already pointed out, that we don't currently meet the criteria for grant ourselves. And finally, Mr. Mayor, I think we're all acutely aware that people are struggling to make ends meet currently. I include myself amongst those currently as far as fuel is concerned. It's why we've all bought food and other helpful household items with us this evening. Colchester Borough Homes address tenants struggling to heat their homes through the current energy efficiency programme, and their excellent financial inclusion team who work closely with tenants, checking that they're on the best fuel tariffs and offer advice on behaviours that can assist in keeping bills as low as possible. I know through correspondence this is something very dear to Councillor Scordis' heart, as it will be to other members present. Mr. Mayor, this is an important debate, and I'm happy to work with anyone to address the climate emergency in whatever capacity I can, as detailed in both the main motion and the amendment. I support the amended motion.
Yep. Thank you very much, Councillor Ellis. Councillor Dundas, next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wasn't going to speak on this item, but I just wanted to pick up on a couple of the points made. Firstly, actually, I've got a query actually with Councillor Barber's amendment, which you probably won't thank me for. I actually understood that although the original target was 2030 for the private rented sector, there was talk of bringing it forward to 2025 for new tenancies and 2028 for renewals, but I will need to check that. If that's the case, that is an extremely ambitious target and fits in with a lot of very ambitious targets, which I'm pleased the government have set. That's just 3 years away. But I will check my facts on that. I don't agree with Councillor J. Young's comments that the amendment slaughters it in any way. In actual fact, Councillor Corey read out what he thought was the most important sentence, and that is there as it was originally. I think it is a good amendment because I think it actually states where people can get help and commits us to helping people. We often talk about one of the primary roles of this council, and we have a big and very dedicated professional team which is there to help people be pointed in the right direction, be it with benefits or be it with housing or with anything in life. So I think this council resolves to continue to promote the green Green Homes grant is a very, very good thing to put in this motion, and I can't quite understand why anybody would be against it. So all I will say is I will support the amendment. I think it makes it a better motion. I think it's something everybody in this council should be able to get behind, and I hope everybody votes for it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dundas. Two more speakers. Councillor Cox next, please, and then Councillor Buston.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, I wasn't going to speak, but I feel rather prompted to do so. I don't feel the amendment is comparable to the spirit of the amendment is not comparable to the spirit of the original motion. I have been promoting the Green Homes initiative. If you check my Facebook page, you'll see I've been posting that yesterday. It's reached 449 people, which is great. But that's going to be a drop in the ocean, isn't it? I don't think we're going to see the uptake of this grant that we're going to need to see in the time available. It ends in March, I believe, and that's the point of information. I think the money has to be, well, the grants have to be in, the applications in between now and March, which gives us 4 months to address the issue before us, and I think that's simply not enough time. I think what attracted me to the main motion is that it calls for a plan for Cabinet to work with Housing, Environment and Planning to come up with a plan for retrofitting homes at scale. And I don't want to be really part of a council that this is its first meeting since COP26, part of a council that voted against the idea of having a plan to retrofit homes around insulation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Buston last. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Mayor. Big hand, small map. I'll preface what I'm going to say with 2 points. Firstly, and most importantly, I totally agree with and support the general thrust of trying to improve homes to be insulated as much as possible, such that properties can be as warm and as insulated as is possible and is practicable for them so to be. Secondly, I have an interest here insofar as I have lived in, have older property, and these are indeed shown in the members' register. Basically, the point of what I'm pointing out is that some properties, particularly Victorian properties, 2 up, 2 downs, of which there are a considerable number in Colchester, are simply incapable of being brought up to EPC-C. They were not designed for such purpose. I know this as I've tried to do it with certainly a property I have, and the result was that a perfectly temperate property suddenly became the subject of damp, condensation and mould. I had a surveyor, an RICS surveyor, look at why this was, and he confirmed why the problems had arisen. They had arisen because I'd installed these various insulation items. We had basically tried to redesign an unredesignable property. The majority of these properties, as I noted before, are Victorian 2 up and 2 down properties, now as are in the private rented sector. Colchester has lots and lots of these. If these properties in 2025, and indeed Councillor Dundas is absolutely correct in what he says, properties after 2025 will not be permitted to be relet unless they come up to EPC-C. If they are prohibited from being relet because they're incapable of achieving that standard, then all the current renters that are in those properties, and it's mainly in those properties that renters in our town are, will suddenly appear on the Colchester Borough Council housing list, which has got 3,000 folk on it already, and that's 3,000 folk too many. Thus, though I support and really approve of the general thrust and aim of where insulation is going and what we're trying to do, we do need to be aware of and try and make central government aware of some of the unexpected consequences of using big hand, small map and not paying attention to the detail is going to cause. Thus, it is with some considerable reluctance, and although, as I said, fully supporting the general aim, I will not be able to vote on this motion at all, as the policy and the legislation currently stands, because the points that I have highlighted have not been properly and thoroughly examined. They are going to cause us, as a council, a big problem, and they're also going to cause folk that are in these properties an even bigger problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Buston. I see nobody else. Oh, Councillor Crowe would like to contribute.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll be brief. I can't add much to what's already been said by colleagues. Nobody in this room would deny the threats we are under, and saying we don't get it doesn't mean we do get it. We just see solutions, different solutions. And I can't... Councillor Ellis has brought us up to date with the situation with CBH housing stock going forward, so I can't add much to that. And Councillor Barber's motion puts the focus on what we can achieve at the moment. The Green Homes Grant gives us an opportunity to put the emphasis on what we can achieve with the lowest income households in the borough. And I'm surprised that the other side of the room is rejecting it and doesn't want it included in the motion. It seems like a no-brainer. So that's what I have to say, and I support the amendment.
Thank you very much. Well, we've had an interesting debate. We will now ask Councillor Barber and Councillor Julie Young to sum up for 3 minutes each, and then we'll bring it to the vote. Councillor Barber first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was surprised to hear that the many speakers on that side of the hall feel that we want to remove any semblance of a plan. I'm not even sure if they've read the amendment, because the last line talks about us resolving to work with other...
Councillor Barber, could you speak into your microphone?
Sorry. It says about working with our partners to try and achieve our climate change goals. It's there right at the end, and it resolves to work with our partners at ECC as well. So I'm not really sure where this notion that we don't have a plan. In fact, I'd say it goes further. It sets dates, it sets clear reference to policy. The main amendment actually doesn't specify anything about dates. It doesn't specify anything about any particular policy. It's pretty vacuous, if anything. It doesn't hone down on the real issues at hand. Is how are we going to deliver? And Councillor Buston does in fact raise a fair point, and it is a major challenge in how we achieve that. And that's why we've narrowed down the issues in this amendment to make sure we can focus on what is achievable in this authority. William Sunnox, who spoke earlier, mentioned about what can we achieve at a local level, and our amendment sets out working with partners at a local level, working within clear national ambitious targets. I feel in reference to some of the speakers, Councillor Scordis made a bit of a jab, I guess. I'm looking forward to his submissions on the standards motion as a result. That'll be interesting. However, he did say about good politics, and good politics is achieving aims and delivering for people. And this side of the hall have just talked down a policy that could really change people's lives. No, people may think it's a bad policy if member after member stands up and says it's rubbish. This is about giving low-income households the opportunity to improve their insulation, and we're hearing there's some sort of bad objective. I don't understand it. I do not fathom how a targeted policy for the lowest-income households as a priority could ever be a bad thing. So, in summary, really, Mr. Mayor, our amendment here is much more focused. It is deliverable because it works within clear guideline references, policies. And I would commend it to the Chamber, because that is what good politics is about. It's about delivering rather than sort of kind of, I guess, just saying. And that's what I heard from the other side of the Chamber, effectively, saying, not doing. And our amendment does. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Barber. Councillor Julie Young, please, to sum up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I reiterate that the government, the UK government, does not have a robust long-term national strategy with a funding mechanism in place to retrofit our homes. If you look at the aims and objectives of Insulate Britain, and you know, their methodology and approach may be subject to debate, but they want the UK government to immediately promise to fully fund and take responsibility for the installation of all social housing in Britain by 2025, and the government immediately promises to produce a legally binding national plan to fully fund and take responsibility for the full low energy and low carbon whole house retrofit with no externalised costs of all homes in Britain by 2030 as part of a just transition to a full decarbonisation of all parts of society and the economy. Now, I found this debate pretty interesting, Mr. Mayor, and you know, the amendment is flipping this over. You're trying to say, well, you're not supporting what's out there at the moment to take advantage of. And I think that's really underhand. This is not what this motion is about. This motion is about asking the government to help us with a job that's too big for us to do on our own. That's what it's asking to do. And surely everybody in this room believes that's the case. Councillor Ellis knows full well the costs involved in this process. And yes, they are working towards insulating the 900 homes that are currently below the C-rated energy standards in Colchester Borough Homes. But there are plenty of properties, and Councillor Buston talked about them, that need so much work doing on them. So it's pointless to shut our eyes and ears and say, well, you know, we just go with the scheme we've got. That's what we can deliver. We need to ask the government to help us fund this. So I'll end with these two words, Mr. Mayor. In terms of the amendment, I went to see Christmas Carroll last Saturday. There are two words that come to mind: with the failure to ask government to support this authority, which with much needed funding to insulate our energy inefficient homes in a timely way. Mr. Mayor, the two words that spring to mind on the amendment are bargain.
Right, we've now heard the debate and the summary, and we're now going to put the main amendment to a vote. So all those in favour of the main amendment, please. Hands up. Keep them up, please. Okay, thank you. And all those against, please.
Mr. Mayor, the result of the vote is 21 voting for, 17 voting against, so the amendment is carried.
So the motion is now amended by the amendment. And Councillor Julie Young, you now have another 3 minutes if you wish it.
We've got many other issues to debate, Mr. Mayor, so I would rather move to the vote, please.
As you wish. Right, all those in favour of the amended motion, please. And all those against, please. Okay, thank you. Okay, it's carried. We don't need the numbers, I don't think, at this stage. Thank you. What I would say is I'm still very proud that Colchester Council is building new council houses to a modern energy efficient standard. We need to continue that at a pace. Yes, there will be some houses that are not adaptable, but we have a few years to actually improve individuals' lives and families' lives, and we will persevere with that as a council, and we would all wish that. Thank you. We now move on to standards and invite Councillor King to move motion J.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I hope I can be heard. I move that the motion on standards, the details of which are at page 4 of the supplementary agenda of this meeting, be approved and adopted. Mr. Mayor, this motion is not, as Councillor Willett suggested, naive to faults by any of us or others or of different parties. It makes a contrast between what many of us have been appalled to see in national politics in Westminster and elsewhere, but it's not suggesting that life is in any part of government is without fault. It's just making a contrast between the worst of what we have seen, which has offended many privately and some publicly in Westminster, versus the best of what we know here. The motion itself has been framed to make it supportable across the chamber, to focus on us here, to make clear where we cross-party stand, to remind us across this long floor what does unite us, doing the very best we can for those we serve, not ourselves. Recoiling, those are the right words, I think, from poor behaviour wherever we see it, like those painfully rammed through, then withdrawn changes to standards and rules in Parliament, not here, to help a friend. Now, loyalties do matter, but we here all know what is honourable and what is not. We know we should put principle, promise, duty first, not ourselves. Our national politicians largely are and should be no different. They, like us, are bound by rules of conduct and behaviour as taught to today. But for some, it's just a storm in a teacup. For others, holding their nose and voting for what they do not necessarily believe. We here know different, and we need to make sure our public know also that we know different. All the guidance in all the world boils down to this, simply put. We know good behaviour, what's right and what's not. Local government, and I've worked in many places in this country and abroad, local government here, this is run as it should be. By the book, honestly, not for us, not for partial interest, but for the communities we serve, by the rules, collectively often, setting differences aside. Now, despite that, and the mutual respect and friendships there are moments, and the main amendment touches on this, where our differences are, I fully accept this, badly expressed and hurts are given. That is an area where we can, cross-party, do better, make local politics better, easier to enter, easier to enjoy. But the main amendment widens the scope so wide, so far, and yet so thin as to make it impractical. So I urge members to pass the motion that I presented, shaped, as I've said, to attract support from across this chamber, to affirm our commitments to our public and to each other, that we will, as the evidence has shown today, keep those rules, act with respect, do our best for each other at all times, setting an example, a contrast with the worst that we've seen in recent weeks, and serve our public well. We can, we should unite behind that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor King. And we now have an amendment from Councillor Dundas, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just before I begin, I would just point out that it's a good thing we're not employees, because if we were, the council would almost certainly be in breach of health and safety law this evening, but we do have employees here. I just hope that we're actually checking that they're okay with these working conditions. But I just wanted to make that point, that we need to be careful what we're doing. But
I can reassure you the officers are now checking the heating and wondering why it's not working.
Thank you. I can barely read my handwriting. But anyway, to the amendment, I agree with what's in the original motion, and that's why I don't think anybody could accuse us of slaughtering it, because every single original word is retained. And I agree that we always need to keep the focus on us, because ultimately what we debate here is about us. The amendment challenges us. It makes it more challenging, but I actually think challenge is good. I don't think we should be scared of that. So let's challenge ourselves a little bit. The amendment says not to use derogatory language. I don't see what's wrong with that. Why? We've had a perfectly civil debate here about lots of issues. We haven't used derogatory language. I think we can all agree we shouldn't act in a disrespectful manner. And yes, we should cover it in print and social media. And I also think it is important that we do extend it to who we associate with. In life, we are judged by our associates, be they individuals or be they organisations. I don't see why it should be any different in local politics or indeed national politics. Let's be honest, in all political groupings and parties, we have people, sometimes in our parties, sometimes our followers, supporters, or even activists, who we are not that keen on, who actually we're sometimes slightly embarrassed about and do not like what they say because they do not meet our standards. So let's call them out. Call them out. Don't have them. Say, go away. We don't want you. I don't understand what is so controversial about that. Be they an MP, be they an activist, be they a supporter, be they a candidate, be they one of your councillors. I don't see why anybody should have any issue with that. It doesn't stop debate. Debate is good. Debate is an essential part of the democratic process. We know, most of us here, we're perfectly capable of having good, proper, civil, robust debates in person, online, on Facebook, on Twitter, in the paper. We've all shown we're quite able to do it. I would say the vast majority of us do so and don't ever stray into other areas. So no, I think it's a perfectly good amendment. I can't see there's anybody here who should be scared of it. And if you are scared of it, well then perhaps you don't really believe in really acting on what you think the motion's saying. So I hope the majority, or I hope everybody will be able to support it.
Thank you, Councillor Dundas. Councillor King, are you prepared to accept the amendment?
No.
In that case, we will debate both the amendment and the main motion. I can start with Councillor Lewis, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am particularly drawn to the amendment because of the, you're forgiven, Mr. Mayor, it's okay. Where was I? Yes. I'm particularly attracted to the amendment because of the inclusion of the social media aspect of it. And social media is brilliant in so many ways, and there's obviously a lot of national discussion about this as well. And it's been phenomenally helpful during the COVID pandemic as an elected member to include information and keep in touch with residents when we weren't obviously allowed to see them in person. But it is also, you see the worst of humanity on it and how people interact with one another. And I've seen members of this chamber conduct themselves in a way that I know they would not do in person, because I have had conversations, and I'm not perfect. I fall my own standards sometimes on social media. It is so easy to make comments that you just would not say in real life. But I've seen people be particularly vicious to other members of this authority, and they just would not act like that in real life. And you wonder, why on earth are you doing that? Because they're perfectly pleasant and reasonable people in real life. And I do think it's therefore important that we stress our conduct on social media, because that is where I see it fall short the most from members of this authority. And I would go also further and I see some really poisonous letters in the Gazette as well over the past, really personal jabs in the letter section of the Gazette. And again, you would not say these things in person. There is a distance that social media has brought us a lot closer in so many ways, but it also has distanced us at the same time. And that's not a particularly original comment. I think we all recognise that. But it's when we're in a very unique circumstance, like we all are as members of a public body, I do feel we have particular onus to act in a very civil and the sort of way you'd expect. Because there's not many, for instance, Twitter, there's not many, I'd say, normal people on Twitter. It's a very political environment. Would you say that to a resident, or say that in front of a resident at election time, I would suggest a lot of the worst comments you absolutely would not. And I think we need to judge ourselves. And like I said, I've made comments that I'm not proud I've said. And, you know, you get into the heat of the debate and you say things that you shouldn't say. You know, it's easy to say hostile actions. And I just think we need to all work better at that. Certain members more than others, perhaps. But overall, I do think social media, that's a really important aspect of why that should be included in the motion and voted on this evening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Barber. I'd like to invite Councillor Buston next, please.
Mr. Mayor, thank you very much indeed. And I have to confess, I do find it a little bit difficult to understand what we're arguing about here. I support the motion, I support the amendment to the motion, which to my mind merely beefed up what the motion actually said to start with. So I'd have thought everybody would have applauded that. I fully support and agree with what Councillor Lewis has said. We quite often end up getting really quite angry and heated about things, and quite often we are tempted to say things, frankly, that we really shouldn't say. We regret it afterwards, because most of us, of all tribes, are pretty decent and upstanding and straightforward folk. And it's that principle that we need to try to carry forward in the conduct of our affairs between ourselves. It was once suggested by somebody I know very well to me, and he'll nod in a minute, that never say anything that you're not prepared to write on the back of a postcard that Postman Pat will see. And that's absolutely true. So why shouldn't we extend that to social media? This evening, this council has taken the step, which we take every year, of appointing a new deputy mayor for the forthcoming municipal year. And I'm delighted that we've appointed Councillor Jowers. In the 20 years plus I've known Councillor Jowers, I've never known him find it necessary to badmouth anybody, either on our own side or indeed on any other group, in order to have his point made. And as so many speakers said, when he stands up and speaks, everybody stops what they're doing and actually pays attention. And surely that must be what we're looking to. We're looking for examples of best practice. We've elected somebody tonight who we think is an exemplar of best practice. We're looking forward to that. Why can't we carry that forward into our conduct between ourselves? So in that the amendment beefs up the motion that's submitted by Councillor Fox and Councillor King, I have to support the amendment, and I'm a little disappointed that we find it not possible to do that, possibly because of party politics, and I regret that. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about this council and its probity. I hope somebody's put another shilling in the meter. It's freezing.
Yes, just for your information, the heating has broken down. We are awaiting engineers. I apologise to everybody that's suffering, but if you wish to go and get your coats, I would recommend it. It is now 2 minutes to 9 o'clock, and we have Councillor Lissimore and Councillor Beverley Oxford next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wish to support the amendment so that it include social media within this motion. I want us to all have mutual respect, regardless of if you are publicly visible using your own name on social media, but also, and most importantly, to those that hide behind nicknames. I don't personally contribute on Twitter anymore. The reason for this is that it has become a cesspit of abuse, mockery, and foul language. As an example, a councillor mocked up a milk carton with my face on it fairly recently, mocking me for failing to respond to him on Twitter. Personally, I found it quite funny. I also thought it strange that he had so little to do really that he'd bothered to waste his time doing this instead of emailing me on the subject he was criticising me for. However, some of my colleagues were astounded by this mockery and made official complaints. I received an apology from one of their fellow councillors for retweeting it, and I thank him for reaching out to me. But what we have to understand is that residents look up to us. We are community leaders, and if we start or continue mockery or abuse, others think it's okay to do the same and worse. And worse. And there is a domino effect, and we as community leaders can't be that flick that starts those dominoes falling. I believe, therefore, that it is crucial to include social media in this motion, and we'll be voting for the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Laws, please. Oh, sorry, Councillor Beverley Oxford first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not surprised the amendment was not accepted. Having been on the receiving end of personal attacks and my integrity being called into question, I know how destructive it feels. It's not only destructive, it's unnecessary. And it's a shame that some members think that this behaviour is appropriate. It sends a completely wrong message to the new councillors that have just been elected, that this is the way we behave, where we can attack each other through meetings, we can say things via Zoom and not attend, because that seems to be all right. And then when you're called out and you're said, well, you said this, that, or something else, the answer is, no, I didn't. And that seems to be perfectly all right. You say, you know what you've said, you know what you've done, but you're not brave enough to say, well, I did say that and I apologise. Just think, no, I didn't say that, and the matter goes away. Well, I assure you it does not. It leaves a nasty taste in the mouth. It starts to affect you mentally, that somebody that you thought you worked with quite well can suddenly turn around and attack you in such a nasty way. Although I do support this main amendment, I don't really think that it's going to make an awful lot of difference. I hope it will, but I'm not holding my breath, because I've been on the receiving end of it, and I know the outcome is nothing will be done and nothing will change. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Oxford. Councillor Laws, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm very grateful to see this motion here tonight. Sorry, I've got a frog in my throat or a piece of wool from a hat. I'm very pleased to see this motion here tonight, but I'm very pleased to see the amendment. Our words and our behaviour matter. They set the tone. They, they impact the discourse in our communities. Social media has become binary. It's become very black and white, no area for grey, and that puts people off. That puts people off getting involved in important debates and discussions, and that's sad. You can't hear tone and inflection in 140 characters on a mobile phone device after you've had half a bottle of wine on a Thursday evening at 10 o'clock. It's sad it's become to this, but it's important that we are here tonight with this amendment to specifically acknowledge that we in our communities, in our roles, have a chance to say that we will do our utmost to conduct ourselves with integrity and honour, and that we will look at our fellow colleagues across the room as human beings and as people that you can go and approach and have a civil discussion with, even if you fundamentally disagree. Long may that continue. So I will be supporting the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Laws. I have Councillor Crowe next, followed by Councillor Gocher.
Thank you, Mayor. I too welcome the motion, and as Councillor Dundas pointed out, his amendment takes nothing away from it. It adds to it. As my old boss used to say, it puts meat on the bones. It gives it a bit of bite. And without it, I think the amendment is left rather hollow. And just thinking back over the past 18 months, we've all been through this shared experience of COVID. Some have had it bad, some breezed through it, but nobody got away scot-free. And has this not taught us all to be kind to each other? Are we really going to say we won't actually create structure and consequences? So what's not to like about the amendment? I shall be supporting it. It's a no-brainer.
Councillor Gocher, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to actually make a comment about the original motion. We've heard a lot of talk about the amendment, but to me, the original motion is something that we all need to address, because there is a massive problem in this country with interest groups, often very wealthy interest groups, lobbying MPs, lobbying politicians, and there's hundreds of thousands of pounds, for example, spent on lobbying by property developers, particularly lobbying of MPs. And it is a deep concern to me that may be influencing the way people ask questions in Parliament and the way people conduct themselves. You know, we are a democracy, but it shouldn't be a democracy that wealth gives you the ability to buy. And to me, that is the crux of what the original motion is getting at. And obviously there have been incidents in the last few weeks, but this is a problem that has been going on for many years. And it's particularly a concern to me because of the issue of developers doing the aggressive lobbying. But it is something that we as a country need to tackle at national level. And I welcome the motion being put in on this tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gocher. Councillor Fox, please. Apologies for the delay.
No problem. Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to address the motion first. When the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom has to place on public record at the biggest international conference of all time that the UK, that he doesn't believe that the UK is a corrupt country, you know that something is not right. And I've been very disappointed and ashamed at some of the stories and the actions of people in Westminster in recent weeks. But I do believe that the great majority of elected members and in this council are motivated by public service alone. But I was disappointed to have heard from some councillors already this evening in previous motions that they didn't believe that that was the case. I can point to those across the council chamber from all political parties who do this out of a genuine interest to represent their communities. People do make mistakes, and when they do, they should take responsibility for them. Unfortunately, in recent months and years, that has not happened, and it has been disappointing that some of our local members of Parliament have remained silent. I think tonight there is an opportunity for all of us to make our voices heard. As the late Joe Cox MP said, we do have more in common than that which divides us. And I certainly feel that I can, get on with people from across the chamber. If I can address the amendment, though, I am committed to treating others with respect and the behavioural standards that our residents expect. We have procedures in this council to take action where councillors do fall below the standards expected of us. But I am concerned that there are people who hide behind anonymous social media accounts that make comments about other councillors and other political activists that are not right. I think that we should treat everybody in a respectful manner, whether it's in person, in print, or on social media. But I feel that there may be some in this room who are not willing to take the action that they could do when these things happen. That there are councillors and candidates that could be deselected and that people aren't willing to take those actions when they could. And that's why I have concerns about this motion, because I'm concerned about whether people are actually genuine about taking the action when they can. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. Sorry, Fox. We've now got Councillor Tate, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll keep it very short. I said I wouldn't speak until it was something I felt strongly enough about. And I feel very strongly about this, having been on the raw end of rather a lot of unpleasant Twitter activity. So my main concern is I was sort of friendlily coaxed, should we say, by my colleagues for a number of years to get involved, but just wouldn't bite the bullet because of the risk of abuse that I would receive on social media. And unfortunately, that's proved to be the case, but I've risen above it. So I think if we want to get more community-spirited individuals involved who feel strongly about Colchester and want to do the best for Colchester, we have to ensure that it's a safe and welcoming environment for them, which doesn't include personal attacks.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hagan, and then I believe that's the end of the debate.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've listened with interest to a lot of people speaking on this motion this evening, and I've got to say it's a very good motion. It's a bit like having the ice cream or the rack of ribs, and then of course Councillor Dunder's amendment comes along, and then you've got your flake or your barbecue sauce, which makes it that little bit better, and we like that. We like better for Colchester. I'm still trying to understand, though, why the opposition just won't buy into the amendment. I'm not hearing any reasons why not. They seem to be pretty much agreeing with the wording, just not committing to it, which is a bit of a shame. Of course, we've all been there on social media, probably me more than maybe most in here, and we've all said things in our past we may not agree with now, and we go back and we say, whoops, okay, it was a little bit raucous, and I'll apologise for that, and I have done on many occasions. I will say, however, social media is quite often an echo chamber, especially Twitter. Facebook groups are interesting. And again, you have to look out for the honest questions. You have to look out for those real residents who are asking those questions. And there's quite often opportunity there for, let's say, suspect accounts who may ask questions that don't quite seem to be from maybe people that would actually be in the area that particular group is set for. And, this amendment addresses a lot of those concerns to make sure that every single person in this room acts with the highest authority on social media to set that standard, likely that all candidates in the future, activists especially, can follow. And it's not just about social media as well, it's about in print. Some of the leaflets we often see through doors can be quite alarming. There's some in here that prefer bar graphs more than others perhaps, and we need to look at those and make sure that the information we're putting out is factual and not misleading our residents in any shape or form, because often those leaflets get photographed and they get posted on social media, and the facts do get drowned out. We need to do more for Colchester, and I completely support this main amendment, and I think everyone in here should do too. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hagan. We've heard the debate, councillors, so I'd like to ask Councillor... Sorry. Oh, I beg your pardon. Sorry. I would just say we're running out of time, but we've got Councillor Gerard Oxford and Councillor Willits, but then we would have to go straight to the vote without any summing up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've looked at this with great interest, and like most motions that come to the council, it's attacking government. In relation to this one, it's about the lobbying of various members within the House of Commons. There's a parallel. I mean, I don't agree with the lobbying side of things. I just don't. I just think they should be doing one job and that's it. But I think it's also the same in this chamber. I'm opposed to double hatters. I'm opposed to people with non-exec directors, etc., etc. I just think if you're a councillor, you are a councillor. If you want to be a councillor somewhere else, then you just be a councillor somewhere else. But I've always felt that. In 22 years, I've always felt that. So I'm not going to apologise for that view. Others may differ, but that's mine. Also, the issue around conduct, when you get people coming into your ward and speaking to residents on our doorsteps, and people think that message is not going to get back to us, they're not living in the right planet when they think that. So when derogatory comments are made on the doorstep by people, and I won't name them, but they know who they are, it does get back to us. And, you know, we remember these things. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not a fan of social media. I really am not. I mean, when I recently had one where I had about 100 posts, but it turned out those 100 posts were from 14 people with multiple posts. Yet somebody come on and said, oh, over 100 people opposed to X. And it wasn't, it was 14 people. And you also, when you drill down, you find out that a number of those are known to be not supporters of yourself, which is fair enough. Anybody can do that. But the other thing as well is when you get things in literature which are not factually accurate, like, for instance, when somebody claims to be your voice in the House of Parliament, when, as far as I know, our MP is Will Quince. So, you know, there you go. That's me done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Oxford. And Councillor Willits, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think Councillor Dundas's amendment strengthens this particular matter and brings substance to a motion which otherwise doesn't really address the local issue. Now, the Members' Code of Conduct covers such matters as how we treat each other with respect, our behaviour, not using derogatory language or acts which are disrespectful to people in print or social media. That is all covered by the Code of Conduct. But one of the problems that we have is the courts have ruled that people can have two personas: their persona as a councillor and their persona as a private individual. And the Code of Conduct for the Council, which we've already discussed this evening, for instance, under our ethical standards, that only applies to a person in their persona as a councillor. So if they slag off other people and use disrespectful language, but claim they're doing it in their personal capacity, not in their capacity as a councillor, then we cannot take action against them. Now, the majority of residents of this borough do not appreciate that. You know, a person is a person, whether they speak as a councillor or in their own capacity. Most sensible residents believe that you cannot divide the persona in such a way. And this is a matter which has perplexed the Governance Committee for some time. And I think we'll have to think about making representations to government that, you know, if a person is a councillor, they are a councillor, the general public see them as a councillor, and if they then try and wriggle out of responsibility for what they're saying, if it is disrespectful, they don't treat others with respect by saying, well, I was doing it in my personal capacity, not that of my councillor. I think that's bunkum. Most residents would also agree that it's bunkum, and we should have a change in the rules. The courts were misguided when they decided on the two persona issue.
Thank you very much, Councillor Willits. Councillor Dundas, would you like to sum up for 3 minutes, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I'll be as fast as I can. Very interesting debate. I'm truly actually amazed that the amendment wasn't accepted, but I just have to pick out a couple of speakers. I do welcome Councillor Fox's comments. I thought he made some very thoughtful comments there. I'm glad he agrees with much of the sentence around to not use derogatory language or disrespectful manner. As far as the comment about how we deal with candidates, activists, or whatever. It actually says commit to taking whatever action we can. That is whatever action we can. We all know that we work within party structures, what most of us do, which are not always easy. We are sometimes, our hands are slightly tied, but what we're committing here to do is to do our best. I also pick up on Councillor Gocher's comments. You may have thought, actually, with this amendment, we'd try and take a lot of the words which may be slightly uncomfortable in places for us out of the motion. We haven't. I deliberately didn't to make it easier for everybody in this chamber to vote for it. I'd also comment about language in social media. Most people actually here in this chamber don't use bad language in social media because it loses you votes. So you don't get elected. And if you have your supporters or your activists use derogatory language or act in a not very nice manner on social media, that loses you votes too. And all you have to do is when somebody posts something like that, you just reply, please don't use that language. Please don't associate me with that. Please don't be one of my supporters if that's how you're going to behave. Please be silent. It's very, very simple. There is ways of doing this. So I'm staggered that actually we can't get unanimous or appear not to be getting unanimous support for this. There is nothing in that extra paragraph, and it is in the extra paragraph. It takes nothing away which any decent person or any sensible councillor could not support. So I hope we get full support for it.
Thank you very much. And Councillor King, if you'd like to sum up your main motion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I want to thank everybody in this chamber for the quality and I feel the passion. It's real. There are very few of you in here, and I look across to colleagues on the other side of this chamber who haven't been hurt, wounded for a moment, even the most robust of you, by somebody just having a crack. And it was good to hear that some of you acknowledge, curiously, you've done the same. So the difference here is very small. Absolutely, I agree with that, Councillor Dundas. You will know, your colleagues may not, that I offered you something very close to this. My only reservation was the long, long list of all the people who might be included. That was my only concern. I offered you words and language which was absolutely on the button about the spirit of your amendment, because it's absolutely right that we should treat each other with respect. I accepted that. Why wouldn't I? I behave that way. I hope that's understood. And I encourage that in my groups and with colleagues across the chamber. So let's, for those who listen, there must be at least a dozen out there somewhere, the difference is tiny. In effect, whatever we now do on the votes, we'll end up in the same place. We've had a cracking debate, Mr. Mayor. We have not focused on what started me thinking this had to be debated, which was national politics being in a bit of a mess and the government not being its best self. It's not having a go to say that, because I know many of you in this chamber believe exactly the same thing. But it's swung round, fair enough, to be about points of difference locally, which actually tells you a lot. In truth, those differences are small, but personal behaviours can fall short of what we know at the moment of pressing the button is what we should do. So let's focus, if I can, on what we agree on. Politics here could be done better, we could be kinder to each other, but we are honest in this place. We do, in the round, behave properly. We act as we should. And so we should. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor King. So we now vote on the amendment. All those in favour of the amendment, please. Thank you. And all those against, please. All those abstaining, I guess.
Mr. Mayor, the result of the vote is 23 for, 1 against. Okay. The amendment is carried.
Okay, so now we have to vote on the substantive motion, which is the amended motion. All those in favour of that, please.
That's unanimous, Mr. Mayor.
And how nice that is to see that, because As so many people have said tonight, and as I said about David Amos's funeral, you know, we need to treat each other with respect and dignity. And every time we all serve as public servants, we stand as public servants, and actually we need to, well, when we disrespect each other, we undermine the whole council's reputation and everything else. So let's try and make a better job of it in future. As Councillor King said, national politics may be something different, but Colchester should be proud of what they do. Thank you. You'll be surprised to hear that we've actually used 80 minutes of motions up already. So I'm afraid the last two motions fall, and frustratingly, we have two special council meetings coming up, but neither of those accept motions. And then the next full council meeting, standard one, is the budget meeting, which also does not accept motions. So I'm afraid the next motion time we have motions will be under Mayor Young. So I may be able to join in. So anyway, so we'll move on to the rest of the agenda. Thank you very much. Councillor Willits.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. Can I propose that item 10 on the agenda takes precedence over item 9 so that we do not lose item 10 if questions overrun to 10 o'clock?
Yep. Is everybody agreed that item 10 needs to be agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Right, that's agreed. Thank you. Sorry? Oh, and Councillor Pearson has a point of order as well.
Yeah. Thank you, Mayor. Can I propose, under point of order, that our council procedures implicitly, if not explicitly, suggest that we should work under appropriate conditions, and it's probably time for us to have a break and warm up, Mayor.
You're 4 minutes early. Unfortunately, the cafe is shut. So all I can suggest is you walk around the inside of the building. It's 1 degree outside, but you're absolutely right. The conditions haven't been acceptable, and I'm sure the officers will take that on board for next time.
Mr. Mayor, I do apologise. If I can just clarify, I do understand it is extremely cold in here. The heating has come back on. It did not break down here. This was Virgin Media, whose outward bound connectivity broke down for virtually all the day today, which meant that outbound connectivity was non-existent from Rowan House and a range of our other centres. So this was Virgin Media. What that then did was, when they reinstated it a few hours ago, and you now have Wi-Fi, that unfortunately disrupted our heating system, which is a technological system. It's unfortunately not a dial on the wall, and they have only just managed to restore that. And I just want to be very clear, Mr. Mayor, that that is the reason. It is not that our system broke down. Virgin Media's connectivity broke down for 8 hours, and that is the reason. Thank you very much for allowing me to explain that, Mr. Mayor.
Councillors, I have a suggestion. We have half an hour until the 10 o'clock deadline. There is nothing else urgent on the agenda. How about we close the meeting? And then we can warm up anywhere else. No, sorry? Have we, item 10? We've done item 10. Yeah, we all agreed. Yep. Yep. I think so. Can I wish you all a very Merry Christmas, and I hope you have good heating and insulation in your homes over Christmas.